Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for spending your Valentine's Day with us. Welcome. We'll go ahead and get started with the invocation, which we observe by a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Agent,
Here.
Clegg,
Here.
Halliburton,
Here.
all present.
Thank you. Next up, we've got minutes for approval from February 7th.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of the minutes from 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. meetings on February 7th, 2023.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, clerk.
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thanks. Next up under special business, is Corbin Harp here? All right, well, let us know if you're online. We have a reappointment of Mr. Harp to the Development Impact Fee Advisory Committee for a 4-year term. I really appreciate the service of all Boiseans on our various commissions, and then someone willing to re-up for another term. So thank you, Corbin. And with that, this is before you.
Madam Mayor, I ask unanimous consent for the reappointment of Corbin Harp to the Development Impact Advisory Committee for a 4-year term ending in January of 2027.
Without objection. Is he here online? Nope. Okay. All right. We'll move into the.
Madam Mayor,
Yeah.
just real quick, I would note that I think that there might be a couple of other positions available on that commission as well, or committee as well. And I think one of them might be a youth position. So for folks who might be looking to engage, I think that there may be
Okay.
one or more positions available there.
Thanks. Next up, we have revised findings. Welcome, Mr. Mosier.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. You may recognize this item from the January 31st City Council hearing. This is the rezone CAR 22-00019 for the property located at 916 Sherwood Street in the Luss Street neighborhood. The council at this hearing denied the rezone request and requested the planning team return with revised findings. Before the council tonight is revised findings summarizing the reasons for the decision to deny the application. If the council agrees with the new reason statement, then a motion to approve would be needed. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, since I made the motion, I have read the revised findings from staff on CAR 22-19 and agree that it represents the discussion that was had at the city council that night and fairly describes why the application was turned down. With that, I'd move that we approve the revised findings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Clerk?
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
All right, we'll move into the consent agenda. All items with an asterisk are considered to be routine by the council and will be enacted by one motion. There's no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered in its normal sequence.
Madam Mayor, we have a request to remove resolution 85-23 from the consent agenda for separate consideration. I believe it's item number 8.
Second. Did you make a motion to do that? Sorry.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk?
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
And Madam Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, Madam Mayor, a couple of things. I think maybe some other council members will also want to note that second resolution on the agenda tonight, 7923, is the collective labor agreement between the city of Boise and the police officers. I just want to thank everyone involved for coming to the table reasonably and finding a good solution to the issues that we had to work through. I think that this will be a really great labor agreement. I'd also like to note that Resolution 8923 is a unique use of open space and clean water funds to do a partnership to do a stairway from Crescent Rim down to Ann Morrison Park in partnership with CCDC. This has been a connection that's long been needed up to the bench, and really excited that this has been proposed to us for approval.
Madam Mayor. Yeah, further to the second resolution on the labor negotiation with the police union, I'm told it was a rigorous and professional negotiation that worked through a lot of things. And I just wanted to take a brief opportunity to point out that being a police officer in the capital city in a state like Idaho is really hard work. And the contract is obviously about pay and benefits, and those are very important. But I know that that's not what motivates our officers. It's being part of a community, it's service. Those are very noble things. And so I wanted to take an opportunity to thank the men and women in the police department for continuing to be such wonderful representatives of our city and to work so hard in this public service job. And again, to thank the negotiating team for bringing this to a conclusion. I'm happy to be voting to finalize this contract shortly.
Right. Well, I won't be voting, but I too want to thank the negotiating team, both from the management side and from the union side, for working through this, and thank the men and women of the police department. This contract brings what I think is really important, wage increases that are long overdue, as well as the tools that we need to train new officers so that we can get more officers into our neighborhoods and focused on the crimes that our residents want us to focus on, such as property crimes and other things, by also allowing for incentive pay for detectives and other positions. So appreciate the service that our department provides, the importance I would put on the importance that I would put on the need for everyone in this community to feel safe, and then the path that this contract allows us to continue along to meet those goals of safety while compensating folks fairly and increasing the ranks as we need to. With that, clerk, will you call the roll?
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
And now we will move into,
Oh, Madam Mayor, I think we've got that resolution.
the one. Yes, thanks.
Yep. And Madam Mayor, I move approval of resolution 8523.
Second.
Motion and second discussion.
Yeah, just a quick discussion. We had a community member reach out with some concerns about this item, thinking that it had something to do with our zoning code rewrite. And this really doesn't have anything to do with the zoning code rewrite as much as it has to creating action items that will help us implement our Blueprint Boise plan. So I think it's a really great thing for us to approve. And so I made the motion.
Clerk, will you call the roll?
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
And now ordinances, 2 on first reading.
Madam Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on the first reading be read by number and title only and filed for the second reading calendar.
Without objection.
ORD 9-23, an ordinance repealing and replacing Boise City Code Title 9, Chapter 13, Green Construction Code of Boise City by adopting the 2018 International Green Construction Code as amended to be known as the Green Construction Code of Boise City, establishing voluntary regulations increasing the sustainability components of buildings and sites, requiring compliance with the Boise City Green Construction for city-owned projects, approving a summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date. ORD 10-23, an ordinance amending Boise City Code Title 5, Chapter 12, Section 35 to amend control valve location requirements, amending Title 5, Chapter 12, Section 37 to amend floor control assemblies, amending Title 5, Chapter 12, Section 60 and 61 to amend requirements for firefighter air replenishing systems, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. And now we will move into second reading.
Madam Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on the second reading calendar be read by number and title only and filed for the third reading calendar.
Without objection.
ORD 6-23, an ordinance CAR 21-00035 for property located at 5727 Hill Road, annexing 3.825 acres of certain lands and territories situated in Ada County, Idaho, adjacent and contiguous to the corporate limits of the city of Boise City, establishing and determining the land use classification of said 3.8 acres as R-1B, single-family residential, 4.8 units per acre, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such annexation and zone change, directing the city engineer to lodge and file a legal description and map for said annexed lands and territory, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Auditor, the Ada County Treasurer, the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission, providing that a copy of said legal description and map of said annexed lands and territory be recorded with the Ada County Recorder and filed with the Ada County Assessor and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, and providing an effective date. ORD-8-23, an ordinance amending Title IX, Chapter 2, Development Impact Fee, Sections 7, 12B, and 13 of Boise City Code. This amendment updates the attribution of certain local park impact fees, development impact fees per service unit, assessment and payment of development impact fees, and providing an effective date of April 10th, 2023.
Thank you. And now third reading.
Madam Mayor, I move that further reading of ORD 5-23 be dispensed with and the record reflect that it has been read the third time in full.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, clerk?
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries. ORD-5-23, an ordinance CAR 22-00017 for property located at 7735 West Victory Road, annexing approximately 7.8 acres of certain lands and territory situated in Ada County, Idaho, adjacent and contiguous to the corporate limits of the city of Boise City, establishing and determining the land use classification of said 7.8 acres as R-1C, single-family residential, 8 units per acre, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such annexation and zone change, directing the city engineer to lodge and file a legal description and map for said annexed lands and territory, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Auditor, the Ada County Treasurer, the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Recorder, and the Idaho State Tax Commission, providing that a copy of said legal description and map of said annexed lands and territory be recorded with the Ada County Recorder and filed with the Ada County Assessor and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, and providing an effective date.
Madam Mayor, I move that ORD 523 be approved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, clerk?
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
We're supposed to go at noon, so.
And now we will move into subdivisions. So this evening, we've got two on here, and I'll first hear from staff, David and Sabrina. Yes, okay. For the two different presentations that we have, and then the applicants. Are both applicants here in person? Great, okay. And then let me know if you're in agreement with the terms and conditions of the staff report, and then we'll see if we need to do more from there. And with that, go ahead.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, members of the council. The applicant is requesting a vacation of a public utility and drainage easement along the interior rear property lines between lots 5 and 6, block 2, associated with the urban land tracts unit number 1 subdivision. The plat notes identifying building setbacks and lot coverage restrictions are also requested to be vacated. The subject property is approximately 10 acres in size and comprised of 2 lots located at 2700 South Beverly Street and 2711 South Fry Street within an M1D zone. And as you can see from the aerial photograph, the property is located within an industrial neighborhood near the airport. In 1972, the City Council approved the suburban land tracts unit number 1 subdivision with platted 10-foot wide public utility and drainage easements along the interior property lines. In addition, the subdivision included building setbacks and lot coverage restrictions as plat notes. The applicant intends to consolidate lots 5 and 6, block 2 of this subdivision to construct a large industrial building, which will be situated over the top of the easements located between the lots. It will also exceed the setbacks and lot coverage restrictions noted on the plat. As such, the easement and plat notes will be required to be vacated. The lot coverage requirements were included with the original plat note since the site is within the airport zone H, which is the airport noise transition zone, and is intended to restrict non-compatible land uses from around the airport. However, stating these restrictions and building setbacks on a plat note is not required since these standards can change over time. Furthermore, Boise Airport submitted a letter supporting the requested vacation of the plat notes. In summary, letters of relinquishment from all utility companies servicing the vicinity and the airport have been received. The easement location and plat notes are identified on the slide in front of you. In conclusion, the planning team recommends approval of the easement and plat note vacations. Thank you.
Any questions? All right. Kim Brown?
We're in agreement. The airport has this property and
Great.
they're doing land leases to put that warehouse that he's talking about. And all the utility companies have agreed to the vacation. So
Great, thank you. Is anybody here to testify on this item? Any further questions? All right, I'll go ahead and close this one.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move approval of SOS 22-27, request to vacate a portion of public utilities and drainage easement on 2700 South Beverly Street.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, clerk?
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Hallie
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Great, thank you. And next up, we've got Sabrina Mortensen will present SOS 22-19. And then Matthew Wiesenhan. Hi.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the item before you is a request to vacate plat notes and easements associated with a portion of Lot 13, Block 2 of Boulder Heights Estates Subdivision Number 3. The subdivision plat recorded in 2007 designates Lot 13, Block 2 as a common lot, which is to be owned and maintained by the HOA. Additional plat notes reference easements within Lot 13, Block 2 is shown on this slide. The applicant requests to partially vacate plat notes 1, 2, and 10 and the associated easements on the property to allow the easternmost portion of the site to be sold to the adjacent property owner to the east. All easement holders have provided letters of approval, and the vacation request will only affect the portion of the lot that is to be sold. The remainder of the lot will remain as common open space to be maintained by the HOA. The existing 10-foot wide public utilities, drainage, irrigation, and streetlight easement along Rhyolite Way is to be maintained as it is actively used by the easement holders. The planning team recommends approval of the vacation request, and I'll stand for any questions.
Looks like there are no questions. And thank you. Mr. Wiesenhan, are you in agreement with the terms and conditions of the staff report? Great, the record will reflect that. I want to make sure nobody's here for this one. All right, I'll go ahead and close it.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move approval of SOS 22-19, request to vacate a public utilities, drainage, irrigation, and streetlight easement at 2711 East Rhyolite Way.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, Clark?
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Hallie
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And now we'll move into the regular, thank you, sir. Regular public hearing portion of the evening, CR 22-34. Welcome, Jesse. We've got Jesse Lyle for the city. Pivot North Architecture. Great. Hi. Is here. We don't expect the Downtown Neighborhood Association to be here. You are? No. Okay, Dave. The Downtown Neighborhood Association? Oh, sure. The next application? Okay. And then if you've signed up for this one already, I will call you. And if you're here to testify, but you didn't sign up, that's okay. Once I've called through people, just come on up and you can give your testimony, and then I'll just ask you to write your name and address on the piece of paper. And we'll also check in online to see if anybody's there. With that, go ahead, Jesse.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. The item before you is CAR 22-34, a rezone of approximately 0.87 acres from RODD to C5DD with a DA located at 672 Ash Street. The property is designated as mixed use on the future land use map, and the other designations nearby include downtown mixed use, Boise State Master Plan, and Parks and Open Space. The applicant is requesting to rezone 4 parcels that contain a total of 16 naturally occurring affordable units. The applicant is proposing to rezone to construct approximately 130 residential units with approximately 1,000 square feet of commercial space. The properties are located in the Pioneer Neighborhood District of the River Street Master Plan and are adjacent to 2 transit routes, number 4 and number 5, with the nearest stop approximately 350 feet to the northwest. The master plan emphasizes sustainability, the provision of workforce housing, and identifies areas on the edge of the neighborhood, such as the subject property, to redevelop with neighborhood serving commercial uses. Due to these recommendations, a development agreement has been included. The proposed development agreement includes a provision to provide at least 13 units reserved for tenants making 100% of the area median income or below, with the contingency that the applicant obtain funding from CCDC through the River and Myrtle Urban Renewal District, which closes in 2025. Additionally, the applicant must provide for some commercial space on one of the project corners and will incorporate sustainability techniques. The applicant is proposing a mixture of studio to 2-bedroom units with podium parking and activated uses on the ground floor. Public comment was received with questions concerning the tenant assistance package, particularly wanting clarification on what resources would be provided and if financial assistance would be provided as in the Reitenbaugh rezone. The applicant is not proposing any financial assistance at this time. And in conclusion, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval, and I will stand for any questions.
Any questions?
And Mayor,
Yes.
so the existing units that are on there right now, they're not deed restricted to affordable housing. They just happen to be naturally occurring affordable housing.
Madam Mayor, councilors, that's correct.
And is it safe to say that they're probably below 100% AMI, maybe far below 100% AMI?
Madam Mayor, councilors, I did look into this a little more and see if I could find the current rate. However, none of them are available online, but I would assume that they are below that.
Great. And just one more question, Madam Mayor. I don't believe with C5 that we do any sort of housing bonus ordinances related to affordable housing, parking or height, because I think the height's unlimited and the density for housing, it's unlimited. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, councilors, yeah, the C5 or the housing bonus ordinance is not for the C5, it's for other districts because of those reasons.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. Other questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and hear from the applicant.
Awesome. Oh, sorry.
There's a clicker there, I think, somewhere too that you can use.
Thank you. Here we are. Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm Ian McLaughlin. Oh,
You can just lift it some.
thank you.
Thanks.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm Ian McLaughlin. I'm with Pivot North Architects. I don't know if I need to state my address, but 116 South 6th Street, Boise, Idaho. I have Dean, who I will hand over for a brief introduction. So,
Thanks, Ian. Council Mayor Dean Pape, 1199 Shoreline Drive, representing the ownership for the redevelopment of this site. Appreciate your time. Appreciate the time and energy spent by the city and CCDC staff. Looking forward to bringing this project to fruition in the near future. I think it's very important to point out the timeline associated with this project, as the funding structure to help support the housing elements or what's in the development agreement for affordable housing elements of this project is directly tied to a funding source associated with CCDC. CCDC's district will expire and those funds will be removed or unable to support the project. So ultimately our reason coming for rezone for this property is to allow those funding structures to support the project, to allow those housing elements to be included. We understand if successful, if unsuccessful to move forward, the property owner would then hold and wait for the future zoning to then go into place and then put the provided project into fruition at that point without those additional housing units, which are, we believe, supportive for the neighborhood. I think it's important to note currently there are 12 units being used on this property right now. In working with the city, the minimum amount of units that would be built into the larger project is 13 or 10% of the total units. We have approximately 130 units currently, but if the project became bigger, the percentage of units at or below 100% AMI would also grow with the total project size. We have been in touch with at least one of the residents. I think they actually sent an email into the city as part of one of the public comments to help provide some assistance in finding them a new location. The timing of this does allow for that if we are successful with the rezoning tonight, will allow us enough time to then work with all of the residents to find them a new place to live before the project actually commences.
thank you, Dean. I'm going to gloss through some of the contextual information since Jesse did a pretty good job of covering it. As she said, the project's on River Street. It's boxed in by 11th and Ash.
Currently zoned RODD, and we're looking to rezone it to a C5 DD. As you can see, right across the street from 11th Street is the C5 DD zone. This is a snapshot of the proposed zoning code rewrite. So as you can see, that whole area is being proposed for MX5, which is the equivalent of what C5 is currently. So as Dean kind of pointed out, we're looking to rezone this to move forward with this project at this time and not have to wait for the rezone. This is the city's land use map. So as you can see, it falls squarely within the mixed use, right next to the downtown mixed use. We feel like multifamily and the commercial, ground floor commercial portion of this building is supported in that area. This does fall within the activity center supportive area as outlined by the housing density bonus or housing bonus ordinance. That housing bonus ordinance promotes increased height and density, which this project is proposing. This project falls within the River Street master plan, specifically the Pioneer District. This area is interesting because there's a diverse range of existing housing. So we have everything from market rate across the alley to workforce housing and affordable senior living across of Ash Street, and then a variety of other housing within that area. So we feel like this project fits well with that context and would help provide additional housing and additional diverse range. Existing site survey kind of shows the four fourplexes, two-story fourplexes that are there. Some additional contextual information or contextual images of that. So the proposed project, this closely mirrors what Jesse had shown. There are some slight revisions. We have 2 levels of parking, one half story below, one half story up. Ground floor is raised 2 feet off of the floodplain. So you can see along River Street, we have activated the street front with lobby, leasing, amenity, fitness. We have ground floor units with built-in stoops and patios. And then we have that commercial space on 11th and River, which we feel like is kind of the most effective area next to the 11th Street bikeway improvements. Moving up the building on the third through 5th floor plans. We have a range of studio 1 beds, 2 beds. And then at the top floor, we have a resident amenity space facing kind of northwest. So you get views of downtown and the river. And here are some preliminary kind of 3D images showing we're working on the massing, we're working on fenestration, breaking up the volume of the building, incorporating high quality materials, brick, metal panel, stucco as well. And another view from 11th Street looking towards Ash. And then I've included some project information stats if we want to dive deeper into that. But just to kind of summarize, again, we're looking to rezone from RODD to C5. This would be to allow for the increase in height that comes with that. We're only proposing a project up to 75 feet. And then we're looking to increase the allowable density as well to accommodate those 130 units. We feel this project would promote a walkable neighborhood, transit-oriented neighborhood. It would activate River Street with a mix of units, commercial space, and amenity space. It would help provide a more diverse range of housing for that neighborhood and contribute to the long-term sustainability of that neighborhood. Thank you. I'll stand for any questions.
And Mary, first of all, very great looking building, really great spot to have a lot more density. And I guess maybe that's my question. Was there something that limited you to this many units, or did you explore going even denser, even higher, getting more spots in that area?
There's a number of things. One is constructability. So to do what's considered a 5/1 podium, you're limited in
to 5 stories over 1 story of concrete. So that had some limiting factors to it. The additional one was parking. We are trying to get as close to possible to 1 per 1. I think we're at about 0.92 stalls per unit. While that is not required, the client was very emphatic that he wanted to be able to park the units. So that had a limiting factor as well.
Great. And then Madam Mayor, maybe one follow-up question. So I really appreciate you all working with CCDC to try to figure out a way to get some of those units in there. I think it was 10% or 13. Is it whatever's bigger or whatever's
10%, which is about 13 units.
about 13?
Correct.
And those are going to be restricted to 100% or below AMI.
Correct.
And then I guess my question there is like, is it just 100% AMI then, or is there like an effort? Or is there any other ways to go lower than that?
I'm going to let Dean speak to that one.
Yes, there's always an effort to provide for, that's a ceiling. So we can't go above that, but we can always go below that.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Mhm.
How big are the units today, the naturally occurring affordable units? How many bedrooms?
I'm not aware, but I believe they're probably 2s and 3s.
They're all 2 bedrooms.
Okay.
Yeah, they're consistently all 2 bedrooms is our understanding throughout the project or throughout the property right now. I don't know the exact square footage.
So, thank you. The requirement is that 13 units be 100% of AMI or below. What size units are you planning for those 13?
Yeah, we haven't prescribed that within the project. So it could be a studio, it could be a 1, it could be a 2 bedroom.
I realize that. Have you looked at it yet? Have you decided what sizes you're going to have
No.
for those?
No, we have not. And I don't remember if we had it in the development agreement in regards to requirements of, but I think we're not going to prescribe a specific unit in a specific location. Definitely not at this point, and we wouldn't do that in our project. So we can mix that throughout the project.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will now hear from the public. Truman Bishop, you, come on up. Is anybody else here for this one? Just raise your hand. Great. So if you'll just make your way over after Mr. Bishop speaks, just come on up. I won't call on you again, and then you can write your names down after. Hi.
Is there a time limit that I have?
Yes, 3 minutes. At some point, you'll see a clock up there, Bill.
Over there.
It'll start once you start.
Aloha, everybody. Citizenry, staff, Madam Mayor, council members. What a great country we live in to engage our government face to face. Thank you for the opportunity. I live at the very corner of River and 11th. I have for the last 15 years, and it's been fantastic. It is a wonderful location, and I'm opposed because it means I'm going to have to move. Now, maybe one of their other properties that they've changed here have an opening for me. I'm not sure. That'd be great if I could just shoulder roll across the alley. I would love to do that. The first thing I want to talk about is parking. River and Ash opened up with less parking places than units approved. And right away, the entire neighborhood ran out of parking. That's before the place across the alley with its 48 units, less parking than units approved, has opened up. And before this place that's even bigger than all those combined, less parking than available. It's going to have to be walkable because no one's going to be able to park there. Which brings me to the next thing, River and 11th, that corner that I've lived on for so long. It's a busy corner. It's only gotten busier since the Simplot headquarters has opened up. You guys have included a raised parking or raised bicycle stuff going on. And then the parallel parking, which has made 11th a skinnier road for actually driving on. And so that corner turning in from River Street onto 11th is going to be even tighter. That's going to be especially difficult for all the semi trucks that pull into that corner for the warehouse located right across the street. They pull in around 4 o'clock in the morning and they go until about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, days that they're open. This is sharing the exact same space that the giant bicycle project along 11th is going on with. Now, on that side of the street with the warehouse, there's not really the raised parking. I don't know if you're just going to do parking lanes for the bicycles and to separate the semi trucks from the bicycles. Just a white line. I hope that works out. That's one of my main concerns. River and 11th, very, very busy. It's going to need a light. You know it. I know it. We all know it. It's going to need a light. Now, I understand the city's not in charge of the roads, but down the State House, right now they're arguing about getting their own roads around their building to be part of their own state organization. Maybe the cities and municipalities in Ada County might want to jump in on that bill to see if cities over a certain population could be in charge of their roads. I don't know if they would be involved in wanting to get involved in city politics like that with just a few cities. I don't know if that's affected anybody here recently or not. Okay, the last little bit of thing I want to talk about. I'm so disheartened trying to find a place to rent.
Time.
And so many places are sidestepping the $30 application fee with $200 administration fees.
Hey, sir, I imagine that's something that we would like to hear about because there is a rule related to that, but you're at time. That's a different topic. So I'm going to ask you to stop there.
Thank you
But
so much for your time, everybody.
would encourage you to send that in, that you just touched on into the clerk because there's a process to look at that. So thank you.
They might get a $100
Thank you.
fee.
All right, come on up.
Hello, my name is Stephen Lieb. I live at 672 South Ash Street with Maddie Andrew here. I appreciate your time for being here. I want to start by saying I love Boise and I see my future and my family's future in this area. And I understand the importance of development and proper city planning. My partner Maddie and I have been living in one of the 16 units, which will be torn down for this project. As far as I can tell, these are solid building structures and homes to a community I've grown to love. The proposed 130 units will provide much needed housing for many families in Boise. My partner Maddie, who works for Catch, a resource for people experiencing homelessness in Idaho, has reviewed the affordability requirement with me and agrees it is not enough, especially for those on a fixed income. Our current rent is $1,100 and includes 900 square feet, 2 bedrooms, parking, water, a fireplace, and obviously the prime River Street location. The 100% AMI proposed agreement leads to apartments of approximately $1,531 being considered affordable rent for a person, one person. This does not include water, electricity, and parking, which is $150 or more most likely. I urge the City Council to reconsider the proposal to provide more affordable housing for future tenants. I lost my spot. Future tenants. Oh, there we go. I would ask for, okay, where am I at? Okay. I have no doubt this is an expensive endeavor for River Street BE LLC, but with some simple math and reasoning, this is very profitable endeavor for them, especially if the building is built well and the location draws tenants, which it will. I would ask for 16 units at least, provided at 60% AMI to better match the current demographic and rent of our apartments. My concern is that this project as it stands would financially push out and displace current members of the downtown Boise community. As for the tenant package agreement, no current residents have been contacted as far as I know. The only information we received is payment and management changes left on the door or vehicles. The most recent note stating we have to move our vehicles ASAP for construction, storage, and no other details. All I'm asking for is open and clear communication and reasonable owners. To me, this means discussing the tenant packages with us when you say you have and guaranteeing our deposit refunds since the buildings will be demolished as long as we clean our stuff out. More affordable apartments and reasonable management is all I am asking for. We are asking for. Thank you for your time.
Madam Mayor,
Mhm.
maybe question for you here. First of all, thanks for coming down. Really love your neighborhood and I spend quite a bit of time there. You asked for 16 affordable units. And I think that maybe at the beginning you brought up that you had cited somewhere about an affordability clause that required that. Do you
So-
have that?
So I'm basing it on their 13 units at 100% AMI. But currently there's 16 units available on this location. So that's where the 16 units comes from.
Yeah, let me follow up with that. I think maybe at the very beginning, you said something that you had seen a requirement. And maybe it was with your work at Catch that would require a certain amount of affordable housing. And I'm wondering if you have that noted, or was that just more of a, not a, like a in code point, but just what you thought was a need in the community?
I think it just is a way to replace the current housing that is there. And like you had stated earlier, it's affordable based on our old, owner who, was charging around 1,100 per unit. Some were less, some were slightly more after we moved in.
Perfect. Thanks again for coming down. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anything further? All right, anybody else here for this? How about online? Nope, nobody's online. Are there further questions for staff before we head to rebuttal?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I do have a quick question. The development agreement only specifies a number of units. Was there any discussion about a number of bedrooms?
Madam Mayor, council members, we had not gotten into the details of the number of bedrooms, but per CCDC's structure that they use for this type of funding, it does require a mix of units.
Okay. And secondly, I'm trying to remember, what was the affordability requirement at Reidenbach on the units that we got there? Was it, I thought it was 80%, not 100.
Madam Mayor, council members, I do not know off the top of my head what that was. I just know that there was an affordability clause and also a financial assistance package offered. And Councilmember Halliburton, I believe to your point about what the last person was speaking to would be the development agreement is where the 13 units came from.
But question, the 13 units in that DA came from the CCDC agreement, not staff seeking to have no net loss in affordable housing, correct?
Madam Mayor, council members, there was quite a lot of discussion about the number of units. Initially, staff had pushed a 1-for-1 and was told that that was not an option, essentially.
And Mayor, I might get around to that question later, but a different question while my brain thinks about the other one. So the relocation package, maybe that council member Clegg was referring to with Riddenbaugh wasn't actually a requirement. That was something that they volunteered to do. I believe we don't have anything that would require a developer to do any sort of relocation package, or am I incorrect in that?
Madam Mayor, council members, that would be something that could be, part of a development agreement, but we do not have like a code requirement for that now.
And then Madam Mayor, maybe one more question. If this were to be zoned a C4 and they receive the housing bonus ordinances that includes an expedited process, I still don't think that would have gotten them to 126 units. It might have been almost half of that. Is that correct? For C4, I think it's like 43 units per acre. And it's on 0.87 acres. So there's no way that they would have been able to get to 126, even with the C4 and some exemptions. Sorry for putting you on the spot.
Madam Mayor, council members, so with the housing bonus ordinance, there is some flexibility on density, but with a C4 by itself, that would not allow for the number of units proposed.
Thank you.
Anything further?
Madam Mayor,
Mhm.
the relocation package is designated as non-cash, but we don't have any other details about what that would include. Have you had any further discussions with the developer about that?
Madam Mayor, council members, we have talked about some of the options that they have utilized in the past to help tenants find other places to live, but mostly it's just been resources and helping to connect them with other services, but I think they can go into that further.
Okay. And Madam Mayor, the city code rewrite and rezone is scheduled to go through later this year. If that were to happen, they could build this building by right. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, council members, that's correct.
Thank you.
I'd ask the applicant to address that question and explain again why you're wanting to do this in advance of the rewrite. And because that'll be part of your rebuttal, and because they could wait, but he stated the reason they've chosen not to. Anything further for staff?
Madam Mayor, I guess I could use maybe some more explanation. I don't know what our no net loss policy means. And from my knowledge, there would be nothing that we could do to require them to have 16 affordable units. I don't think that there's anything that we have in our code or policy that would allow us to do that. But maybe I'm wrong with a no net loss policy. I'm not sure.
Madam Mayor, council members, off the top of my head, I don't believe so, but I can look into that more, but I don't think that we have any.
And the 10
Right
units that
now.
we're getting really is through the collaboration with CCDC and not actually something that we as the city of Boise would be able to require them to do.
Madam Mayor, council members, the way the DA is currently written, it would be 10% of the units or 13, whatever is greater, for a period of 4 years, as long as they can get the funding from CCDC.
All right. Come on up.
Madam Mayor, council members, thank you again. I just want to address some of the comments that we did hear from some of the residents. Parking is always of a concern, and we're trying to find solutions to betterment the neighborhood to allow for parking, including collaboration with the large parking that is across the street from this property. Ashen River is actually a 1-to-1 ratio for unit and parking, and the parking that we're doing across the street. So we continue those conversations. Kudos to Catch. We are working with Catch right now on 2 other projects and the services they provide and allowing us to work with them. And thank you for all your efforts that you do there. We have reached out. We have been in communication with one of the residents this far. The hope is that after this, that we can really engage with the residents to move forward. But it really depends on how we proceed this evening. The question in regards to timeline, the timeline really is associated with, the conditions with CCDC. So if the district expires, the funding that would not be available to support this, the number of units is tied back directly to the funding that would be provided from CCDC. We set that benchmark at 13 or the percentage. It's the same conversation that we've had with CCDC.
Madam Mayor, I had one quick question on a small point from the testimony, which is, since you're tearing the buildings down, you're probably at least prepared to agree that these tenants will get their damages deposits back.
That would not be of issue. Yes, no.
Great.
Exactly.
Thank you.
And again, I think in regards to communication, we are here representing the ownership group. We're not the management company, but I will echo that your concerns about communication are valid, and I'll make sure that they start to reach out to you. And depending on what happens this evening, then we'll start engaging in the process about assistance for relocation.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Sure.
It's
One more.
I didn't catch you before you sat down. I guess I am concerned. Right now, there's 32 bedrooms in naturally occurring affordable housing, 13 units that could be studios or 1 bedrooms. Seems like a not the kind of replacement we'd like to see. I realize that CCDC is assisting with this, so I wonder if there's an opportunity to specify a number of bedrooms that's at least 20 or more rather than a unit count, and at least 13 units and at least 20 bedrooms, so that we can have some assurance that this can still house the number of people that we'd like to see housed there.
Are you looking for me to respond to that request? Yeah, I can't support it at this time, not looking at the complete financial impacts. When we ran the analysis, we used a generalized rental income and the loss of rent income associated with market rate to 100% or below 100% AMI. And that's where we came up with the 13 generalized units. So that's why we talked about the spread of units throughout the entire project. So it's not one specific.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, now I will close the public hearing.
Madam Mayor. I would move to approve CAR 2234 as presented by the staff.
Second.
A motion and a second discussion.
Madam Mayor, I think it complies with certainly all of our comprehensive planning requirements. On the affordable units issue, it's best to replace what we have with something new that serves the same purpose, but in less than a year, the developer can come back and do this as a matter of right under the new zoning code without any affordable units. And so we're getting something here. We're getting some help from CCDC. They're trying to move fast to seize that opportunity to at least move things in the right direction. And so that's why I'm supportive of the application without any further amendment.
Madam Mayor. I try to make every single decision up here entirely based off of code. And then sometimes the gray area that allows you to move things in one direction or another. This developer has done everything right that I can see according to code. I wish that we were getting 16 units. I know some of the families who live in these units. Some of them have gotten bicycles through the nonprofit that I work for. And this is a really, really important area of our city, and having a really diverse population and housing type is really, really important. So my strong encouragement for you is that I don't know there's a council member up here overly concerned about the parking. And so if you're able to reduce parking and get more units and thereby getting more affordable units, I think that that's something that everybody would like to see, at least up here. And so I would encourage you to look into seeing how you could get even more units in that area, since you are exceeding the parking requirements, and trying to figure out how there might be more units we could put in there at that affordability price. And then strongly encourage you, like you said, to talk with the management company to make sure that we are communicating with everybody the best that we can. I think they deserve that.
Madam Mayor. Like Councilmember Halliburton and Councilmember Bajent, I think that this application provides more than we will get 9 months from now. I think that CCDC's assistance is something that we should try to ensure does happen. It's a new thing for them to participate in affordable housing. And I think the more that they do it, the more comfortable they're going to get and the better we're all going to get at it. So I will be encouraging them to work with the developer to ensure that these aren't all studio units, that some of them are real units, and that assistance, make sure that happens. In the meantime, it is pretty exciting to get this many more units in a neighborhood where we have asked for them, where it's well situated for them. And like Councilmember Halliburton, encourage you to look at every way you can to make sure that you're serving the people that are there today, that you're providing as much affordability as you can. And certainly despite the parking issues that we see today, I think this is a place where we can support less parking.
Madam Mayor, I do have one more comment. Our council president, Holly Woodings, isn't here tonight. She's taking a much deserved vacation, but she also serves on CCDC. And I think it would be worth bringing up with CCDC about the 100% AMI versus 80% AMI and like really what those goals are there. And during the Planning and Zoning Commission, there was a lot of discussion about the intersection of 11th and River Street and what a future connection with the rest of our 11th Street Bikeway would look like. And so I think we'll be looking for CCDC to make sure that we do and address that right with the development of this building. So I just wanted to make sure that we made note of those two things as well.
Thank you. No further discussion? All right, clerk?
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thanks. We will, I think we're going to go ahead and take a break. And then we'll come back and do this one, hopefully without a break from start to finish. We'll be back. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with the next and final item. I put some Valentine's Day cookies in the lobby. Feel free to grab them on your way out or for a snack for this next item. So we'll start on this one. We'll start with Tim Keene and Delaney Garlick for the city. And then the appellant, Dave Kangas. Then the applicant, Deb Nelson. Is it just you, Deb? Okay. And then is Mia Russell here for the Neighborhood Association? You know, we really don't like to do that because you get your 20 minutes or what did you appeal as an individual or as the neighborhood association? I need to check on that. If the neighborhood association appeals, I don't think you typically get 2 times. Let me check. Alrighty, so we're combining all these hearings, so it's your special day, Dave. You get to speak twice. We are so lucky. So you'll speak as the appellant, then we'll have the applicant, and then you can speak as the neighborhood association on the merits of the other things. Please don't spend another 12 minutes or whatever we're giving you on the appeal, but it's your opportunity to address, because we're talking about all 3 things here tonight at once. The PUD, the CAR, and the SUB. So that's why it's up for you to decide. Because as the appellant, if you're going first, you should talk about the appeal first. But I just say this because this is a unique situation where I will let you come up as Dave Kangas and then as the neighborhood association, because it's not just an appeal tonight. And then we'll hear from the public. I have some of you have signed up already, so I'll call those of you who have already signed up first. Then if anybody else is here for this one, what I'm going to ask you to do, that's great. What I'm going to ask you to do is after I've called through the list, come sit in the front row and we'll just go one at a time. And then after you speak, while the next person's speaking, you can sign your name and then we'll check to see if anybody's online. And then we'll go backwards for rebuttal, the applicant, and then the appellant. Okay, all good? Tim, welcome.
Mayor, members of council, I'm just going to introduce this briefly, and Delaney Garlick will take us through the staff report and recommendation. This has been a process that's been a long time in coming to council. Wanted to acknowledge that. This is a very, very important piece of property, of course. We've been talking about Victory on the bench for the last several months related to a separate development that came to council about 30 days ago. And then this one, and these are very important properties, have been a farm previously, is now transitioning to other things. And there's been a lot of discussion about how the impact of this development on on the neighborhood, of course, in this part of the city. And last time we were in front of council on development on the street, we talked a lot about Victory itself and bike and pedestrian improvements and safety measures on Victory and so forth, which is good. And there's been a lot of coordination between the staff and the two developers as it relates to how these developments will come together in a design and what they will contribute to the community when they're built. These will be a long time in coming. This is development that will take some time. I wanted to mention that last summer, we really felt like this was in a place that wasn't good enough, that what we were seeing wasn't commensurate in terms of the quality of it with this place, and it had to get better. And we talked to the applicant about that, and I want to give them credit for starting over. And really, among the things they did was find a design firm that's among the best in the United States and brought them in and really started to rethink how they would do this. And I say this design firm's one of the best because they design around creating great public spaces. And, it's not just about the real estate, it's about the value of what you're creating and its impact, not just on the footprint of your site, but the community around you. And so it really, that was a dramatic change in terms of the quality of this. And there's been so much effort by the neighborhood and all the meetings with the neighborhood and the developer and the neighborhood concerns around the lots of details that are very important. And so anyway, I just wanted to acknowledge the effort that's gone into what you have before you tonight from all parties' sides, and acknowledge that ultimately what came out of it in terms of design, I would argue is as good or better than anything that we've seen in Boise. So with that, I'm going to let Delaney go through the staff report now and make our recommendation.
Great. Thank you, Tim. And Madam Mayor, members of the council, before you this evening is a combined hearing. As you mentioned, this will be a request for rezone, subdivision, and a hearing on the appeal of the planned unit development. The project site is approximately 44 acres located at 2017 West Victory Road. This property is located within the Central Bench planning area and situated between downtown and the airport. West Victory Road is north of the site with the New York Canal bounding the project to the south. Approximately a quarter mile from the site is the bus stop at Viston Canal, which is served by VRT Route 3. To the northwest is a mix of hotel and medical office commercial uses. To the northeast is single-family residential neighborhood. Directly adjacent to the site on the east is existing residential neighborhood. And to the west is Seasons on the Bench, a development project which will be anticipated with similar density. Beyond the New York Canal to the south is the Sunrise Rim residential neighborhood. The site has a mixed-use designation, which is intended to promote a more compact, pedestrian, and transit-oriented pattern of development. The applicant requests to rezone the site to R3, which allows for a maximum of 43.5 units per acre. The proposed project would come in at a total density of just over 20 units per acre. The proposed residential mixed-use project is consistent with Blueprint Boise and this mixed-use designation of the site. The project is adequately served by both existing utilities and city services. Due to the specific use and location of this property, a development agreement was included with the application. The DA ties the rezone to the conceptual plan submitted, limits the height to the requested height exception, specifies pathway locations and requirements for community amenities. Additionally, the applicant has offered 25 multifamily units to be deed restricted at affordable of 100% AMI. The request also includes a preliminary plat for residential subdivision comprised of 157 buildable lots and 29 common lots. The subdivision request is to allow for individual single-family lots and extension and development of public roads through the project site. The site provides a mix of housing types with single-family homes, townhomes, and apartments that are a mix of bedroom counts. Additionally, there are commercial amenities included. Access to the site includes 3 points from West Victory Road. The proposed internal streets provide connectivity to existing substreets on the east and planned streets towards the west. North-south and east-west boulevards include significant median landscaping, providing for attractive and safe passages for both pedestrian and cyclists. So on December 15th, the Vista Neighborhood Association filed an appeal of the Planning and Zoning Commission's approval of the conditional use permit for a planned residential development, which included a height exception. The grounds of appeal are as follows. In summary, number one, that the height is not warranted and is incompatible with the neighborhood. Two, that there's opposition to conditions of approval based on the parking, street design, designation, and lack of agreement amongst agencies of ACHD in the city of Boise. And three, that they request additional off-site improvements based on the impact of the proposed development. So in general, the applicant contests that the requested height exception to go from 45 feet to 68 feet creates a negative impact on the neighborhood, and that a variance would not be warranted and would be a special privilege. The Planning and Zoning Commission properly found that the applicable conditional use permit criteria were satisfied, and the case to support the height exception was deemed complete with the project. Variance standards in this case are not applicable, nor did the applicant request a variance. So for the height exception, it is reviewed as a request to deviate from the development standards of the zone district, which are reviewed through a CUP. The applicant is requesting a height exception to allow the multifamily mixed-use building to be built over the 45-foot height limit in the R3 zone. The tallest portion of the structure is approximately 30% of the building's footprint and would reach a maximum height of 68 feet for 5 stories. The remaining 70% of the building footprint would reach 57 feet in height for 4 stories. The nearest single-family home is 450 feet away, north across West Victory Road. The Sunrise Rim neighborhood, which is to the south, has 574 feet from the 4-story section and over 652 feet from the 5-story section. The height exception also allows for a mix of commercial uses on the ground floor with street activation and concentration of density above. During the planning and zoning hearing, commissioners pointed to the significant distances between the tallest portions of the building and the surrounding neighborhood, as well as the intervening landscape, the transitioning building heights throughout the project, and the minimal view impacts as reason that the height is compatible with surrounding uses, and noted that the height created an opportunity for housing diversity and a unique design. While there is no right to a view shed under Idaho law or city ordinance, the applicant did present view studies at the hearing to demonstrate that the impact of the view from the Sunrise Rim would be very minimal. On the second appeal point, the appellant attests that the conditions of approval should not be approved because the proposed parking is insufficient and the street classification and designs were not agreed upon. VNA also contests that they have not been included in the planning and design process related to this project. Based on the units, the uses, and bedroom count, a total of 1,224 parking spaces would be required for the entire project. In total, the applicant is proposing 1,369 vehicle spaces on site, which would exceed the minimum requirement. Additionally, there would be over 900 bicycle parking spaces provided on site. The street design and classification has been addressed by the applicant in coordination with ACHD and the planning department. Revised street sections have been submitted and included in your packet, which have received ACHD, fire, and planning approval to allow slight deviations in public street standards to allow internal public streets for the project. Additionally, the Victory Road site improvements have also been agreed upon by all parties and agencies. I would also note that the applicant has demonstrated ongoing engagement with the Vista Neighborhood Association since project submittal. There have been 3 neighborhood meetings prior to the submittal of March 2022, and a 4th neighborhood meeting was held in September of 2022 before the revised updated plans were submitted to the planning department. Lastly, the appellant requests additional offsite improvements to be made based on the proposed development. There are several offsite improvements required to mitigate the traffic impacts, which are required by ACHD as conditions of approval. Other offsite concerns from the neighborhood were also addressed and reviewed in a work session presented by planning staff and ACHD to City Council on January 10th of 2023. Impacts to traffic would be mitigated and the pedestrian and bicycle safety would be maintained or improved with the following required mitigation. 1 is installation of the pedestrian hybrid beacon at the Malad Street and Federal Way intersection. 2, a road trust deposit in the amount of $14,640 for future traffic calming along both Canal and Columbus. And finally, to install 3 raised crosswalks on Victory Road at the 3 entrances of the project site. The planning team finds that this project has been thoroughly reviewed for traffic impacts, offsite improvements, and mitigation. In conclusion, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the rezone and subdivision, and the planning team recommends denial of the appeal and uphold the Planning and Zoning Commission's original decision to approve the PUD and height exception. And I'll stand for any questions.
Questions? All right.
Madam Mayor, I guess I'll get this question on the books now. I think I know the answer, but I just want to make sure we're in the record. Some of the roadways in the development are being proposed for public and some for private. What's the difference between those?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg. So we worked with ACHD to get as many public street connections as we could internal to the site. The idea here is to provide clear access for public to be able to go through the site and connect to the existing neighborhood on both the east and the west. The areas that are designated private are for alley loaded products, as well as for boulevards that did not quite meet the public street standard of ACHD.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now we'll hear from the appellant.
Would it be okay to deal with this SUB and then just roll right into the appeal? Because or do you want me to deal with the appeal? I can do it either way.
You mean you're just going to speak all at once?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
and then what we'll do is, what's the time that we typically give? 15. You're not going to take 30, are you?
What's that?
You're not taking 30, are you?
No, I
Yeah.
probably, yeah, I hope not.
Well, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you just speak once, and then we'll watch that time and then match that for the applicant. That's why I was asking.
That's fine.
Okay, so what we'll do is we'll start with the normal 15 that we would, and then it'll just track over.
That should be
So,
enough. That
yeah,
should be
okay.
enough. but
And
we'll
if it's
see.
not, it'll just track over, and that's what we'll give the applicant.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Hopefully I don't wander too much. I'm used to just winging it and not having stuff written down.
Well, welcome.
Madam Mayor, City Council, my name is Dave Kangas. I reside at 1715 West Canal Street, and I'm speaking here tonight on behalf of the Vista Neighborhood Association. So this project obviously has a ton of impact on our neighborhood, and we've been working on this for over a year. I believe our first communication was in December with the developer, to where we exchanged emails. I even sent some videos of the property. We went through 3 different neighborhood meetings in which the developer had promised, guaranteed, wouldn't go over 45 feet. That was it. That was one of the main issues with the neighborhood meetings, in which I think we had, first one was like, I think it was first one was like 54, then we had 34 and 42 roughly in there at the neighborhood meetings. And besides traffic, it was height. That was the big issue. It wasn't arguing and screaming about how many units there were. It was dealing with the height and the size of the development. Now, once they submitted in the summer and got rejected and redesigned, they came back out with more units and 68 feet instead of 45 feet. They had, at the last March meeting, I believe is 550 apartments. And when they came back out at the end of summer, it was 616. So it was frustrating to realize that probably the city and the developer, I don't know who was pushing more, but between them, they decided to do something different than what had been promised for the previous 6 months. Now, when we talked about the interior streets, at the first hearing, P&Z hearing, ACHD and the city of Boise really hadn't come together on anything. It's dealing with the streets. They hadn't agreed on the south side of Victory on what it was going to look like. ACHD did not want parking on Victory. We wanted the multimodal pathway and the detached sidewalks. The interior streets they had not agreed to. The city wanted all public streets. ACHD said didn't agree with the street design, and we objected to the large amount of parking on public streets. We didn't feel like a project like this should be having its parking requirement met by using public streets. And I would believe their number is 300 parking places on public streets. And we have a big concern about that, is how many of them are actually going to be on Victory. Now, while the developer is providing a lot of two-car garages, they have very reduced rear setbacks on those rear car garages. So if you've ever tried to get 2 cars into an alley load garage, you really can't unless you spend about 4 minutes doing a 6-point turn to get in next to the car. So realistically, there's going to end up being a lot of parking. So that was the huge issues, is ACHD and the city of Boise just had not come to terms on what the streets would look like. And because they had not come to terms, we didn't know what the streets outcome would be. We didn't know what the widths were, parking, anything like that. Now, I have been told that they have ironed them out. I know they've agreed to what Victory will look like. And I understand they have come to some accommodation. It looks like half the streets are public and half the streets are private, but there's still 300 parking spots on public streets within the development. Now, we've all been through the traffic mitigation. We know what's going on with that. When I went through and watched the work session with Karen Gallagher talking about the 5-year work plan, there was a couple things that really caught me off guard. I didn't have time to submit it, but I printed off 3 of the screenshots that really caught my eye and concerned me. I gave a copy.
You did. Great. Okay, thanks.
To the developer already. The first thing that really caught my eye in the discussion was that they were really thankful that ACHD had committed an additional $5 million to community projects, which is subjective on how long that'll continue. When you look at the second slide, view projects by planning area, 5 to 10 per area. Each planning area has its own needs. Each planning area has one project over 7 years result in increased livability through transportation. We have 4 in that specific area. Is that what we're looking at? 15 years to get the 2 railroad crossings done, dealing with the traffic of 10,000 units. Without some kind of timeline, some kind of condition, promise that is attached to this application, how can anybody support it? How long are we supposed to deal with those crossings? When you look down below, 87 current projects, 50 are programmed, 37 submitted. We added 22 this year, but ACHD only gets 7 to 9 done. That's a negative. You're going backwards. So while I left the work sessions with ACHD and what we've gone through pretty confident that this was going to be prioritized, this says we got no control. We don't know what's going to happen. And that is too much traffic to leave to chance. 10,000 plus vehicle trips a day, and you're aware that this is supposed to be a pedestrian and bicycle, and there's no safe crossings. So when it comes to that, we can't support this. I mean, that's a major issue. We've agreed to the traffic mitigation. A lot of the street design's been worked out. But this, that's a no-go. We got to have something, and I don't know how to do that. That's something that I have to hand off to you to figure out, but you've seen the streets, you've seen the issues. And I really can't think that it would move forward like this. Now, if you think about 10,000 vehicle trips a day on Victory, how can we even suggest or think that those homes aren't going to be adversely affected by this development? And then you add height on top of it. There's a double whammy there just for the homeowners on Victory. And, you know, the homeowners up on Sunrise Rim, height has always been an issue. So I'll kind of close out the first part and roll into the appeal, because that's kind of about where I'm at right now. So the Vista Neighborhood Association is appealing the P&Z decision to allow the height exception. We feel that the decision was arbitrary, capricious, abuse of discretion, and was made without supported substantial facts. Basically, the explanation to grant the height exception was very arbitrary. There's, you know, verticality was used. It's going to be a nicer design. There is no need. It was just something they wanted. And even though that we had a Sunrise Rim residents had sent in letters, and I believe there's like 28 that had submitted letters and written testimony against this, it was kind of not really taken into consideration. There was discussion about having the height exception adversely affecting the views of them up there, but that's not that big a deal. We'll just, you know, we're getting better design. And when you look at the code and the way the law is supposed to be written, there's supposed to be specific hard lines. It's not wishy-washy. I wasn't going to say it, but I had to, is while I was going through this, a life coach had published a book called Strength of the Oak and Strength of the Willow, Navigating a Complex World. And I'm just using this as a comparison because I couldn't help but thinking about the strength of the oak and the state's LUPA laws and Robert's rules on how allowing what cities can do. And the city of Boise has gotten very used to passing a lot of variances. They're blowing in the wind. You know, the oak is strong. It's always been a symbol of strength. The willow blows in the wind, it changes. It falls and breaks apart on its own growth. And there's a lot of simple analogies there if you think about it. The willow doesn't really stand for anything, but the oak does. Now, when we start looking, persuading, twisting, finding all ways to pass these variances and exceptions, what does the code mean? You know, we do not feel that it met the criteria under the CUP. It wasn't, with the height exception, this is not compatible with the uses in the area. I can drive from this street all the way to St. Al's to find a building that is over 35 feet. Excuse me, there's two properties, one on Overland, one on Vista, brand new, under construction, that are 45 feet. So in the past 60 years, no buildings have asked for height exceptions. They're all 3 stories. That's the highest you'll see. You can go down to the newer apartment complex in front of the post office. It's 3 stories. So when you put in this kind of density into a neighborhood and try to call it compatible, stick them in the eye with the height, you're really not listening to the neighbors. It does have a negative impact. You can't say this isn't going to have a negative impact on the people living there. You know, compatibility, if I wanted to go dive into the subdivision, how do all these tiny lots compare to the large lot, single family subdivisions that surround it? It's entirely R1C. The one R3 Melody Thornton that touches the northwest corner are single level manufactured homes. Excuse me. The use will adversely affect other property in the vicinity. Again, there was a lot of discussion by planning and zoning, but they were trading off this for that. It's okay. But the guideline is supposed to be, does this adversely affect neighboring properties? Yes or no? Not, well, that's okay because we're getting this. You cannot say the Sunrise Rim property owners have lived there for a long time. Most of them have been there, grew up in those homes. Not most of them, but some of them grew up in the homes. Many of them are retired. They depend. They don't want to move, but they have enjoyed those views thinking about the height limit and what a mixed use subdivision down below them should be. That height limit is 45 feet. There is a discussion going on that they're not entitled to protect their views. Well, isn't that what a height exception does? Protects the views of the neighboring properties from being overpowering neighboring properties. That's why they're there. No, it's not a navigation easement, but you have transitions, you have compatibility with different zones and height limits to protect the views of neighboring properties. Go down Vista and look at the new Vista and Targhee project. That's square 4 stories next to a little 2-story duplex on the north side. It doesn't get any sun this time of year. It's entirely in the shade. The use will place an undue burden on transportation and other public facilities. We've already talked about the traffic impact of the subdivision as a whole, so we can't deny that. Now, the additional 56 units that were added to this is a contributing factor. Traffic impact is a cumulative effect. The more you add, the more problems you have. So giving them the height exception gives them an extra 56 units. It creates another adverse impact. Additionally, the approval confers a special privilege on the property owners. Basically, in the discussion about the height and whether they're guaranteed a view or not, or who gets the view, it was mentioned that, yeah, go high so those guys can have the views. We don't care about the Sunrise Rim people. We want the new properties to have the views. That were some of the comments, and that was in the discussion. With this height exception, they've added 56 units to get views. Obviously, those views will be premium rents. That's the way things go. They've also filling in, they have 8,000 square feet of flex and commercial space down below that I thought it was a 20-foot ceiling, but I think I was wrong on that. So it is, they're gaining something from it, but the neighborhood isn't, especially the neighbors on Sunrise Rim, and particularly the people on Victory. I mean, how much are they supposed to take? So we would love to, and the last bit is at the time they made the decision, nobody had heard from the school district on that with the impact. I don't know if they have for sure got a letter from them now or not, but at that time they had not. So we're asking that you reverse the decision on the height exception. The subdivision needs some kind of conditions to deal with the railroad crossings. And I don't know how to do that. I don't know where to go with that, because I don't think anybody can deny the issues there and the timing, and I showed you the funding issues. I could read off a lot of conversation that went on between the commissioners during a time that kind of tie in with all this, but I don't think that'll guide my argument any further. So we feel that the height exception was made is arbitrary and really wasn't basis of fact. And there are plenty of issues that I just went through when they were granting the CUP. And the subdivision, well, we need to do something. Thank you.
Thank you. There might be questions.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I've got a question. I should be more patient and let somebody else do it. I'm always kind of ready to go. So great to see you. Thanks for coming down. I appreciate the points that you brought up, and I appreciate you seeing some of the concerns here. That might come up later, and happy to talk about that. I broke eye contact with you while you were talking to kind of look up some of the last minutes, because I thought that I had read something there to figure out where they had addressed it in the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. And I think I found the spot that I was looking for, because I kind of had the same point of view that you did. I was trying to figure out why the height exemption was granted. And with some questioning from Commissioner Gillespie, staff came back and said, we support the request for the height exemption, to achieve the vertical mixed use, the density that we're looking for, as well as the offer for the deed restrictions of the units. By going to that height, they are able to provide 25 units at the deed restrictions. So I guess maybe just getting your response to that, because that I thought was maybe the specific area where they were talking about why they offered the height exemptions.
They did add in the affordability, but it's only 100% AMI. So the neighborhood association really didn't see that as a negotiating point, but that was it. When they're talking about the verticality and the design and density, it really wasn't a need, because let's face it, you're dealing with 40 some odd acres. There's a lot to work with there.
Yep. And then, Madam Mayor, just following up there one more time, the other point that was kind of brought up was the distance and the effect that this has on the other areas. I forget what the number was, but it was like 600 feet from one area, like 400 from another. But that was one of the other points that was brought up, was that because of the distance, this height being placed in the center of the complex and being so far from the neighbors, that it didn't actually have that effect of such a massing being right next to a different type of zone. So just, I guess, your response to that.
Well, I'm sure it would help versus having them in your face, but there's still, that is again, when you look from where Sunrise Rim is at, or even from the canal bank, you don't see any bumps. It's level. You see treetops. You don't see buildings sticking up. And this property has been 60 acres of farmland and trees and wildlife for 60, 70 years. And a lot of the people have lived up there for a long time. So when you see that bump sticking up, it's still a bump. And while the Sunrise Rim people, it does affect some of their views. I can't say how much, because we don't have the building to look at, but it's also just as bad with the people down on Victory. They get to look out at their front door every day. Another issue.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
Madam Mayor. Dave, one of the things that you talked about was the adverse. Well, let me back up. So the height exception here is all tied to the conditional use permit. It's not a variance, right? And then you'd walk through the conditional use test. And I wanted to dig in to what your argument was, like, as to the adverse impact to other properties from the height, because you discussed the view and the bump, but I think we would agree that that's not a property interest that we usually protect. Everybody wants nice views, but that's not a property interest we protect. So setting aside the view and the transportation issues that you talked about, what is the adverse impact to neighboring properties solely that comes from the height?
It's the views.
Okay.
It's when you come out and, especially when you're down on Victory and you're stepping out and there it is. And when you're going out onto your back patio up on Sunrise Rim, enjoying the views there, that's.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Madam Mayor. Dave, I won't ask about the height because my fellow council members have. You objected to using on-street parking, and I guess I'm curious, would you rather have surface parking lots and more asphalt? I'm thinking of neighborhoods where the on-street parking is heavily used and they're typically the most sought-after neighborhoods in the city. So tell me what it is about on-street parking that bothers you.
Well, part of that boils down to also the project on Victory and Targhee, where they had tried to use on-street parking as part of their requirement, and that was a flat no from, that got deferred. That was a flat no through P&Z. And in our experience, this is a huge project. We've never dealt with anything this big. It didn't seem right. And while we appreciate parking on Victory, there is a concern that with the parking requirements on public streets, how many of those are in that, I guess. So, it's a concern. And we haven't seen an alternative design, so I don't have a specific answer for you.
Okay. Are you aware that evidence shows that on-street parking acts as traffic calming?
I'm aware of that.
Okay, thank you.
But in this subdivision, not so much maybe on Victory, but that's also why we did the raised crosswalks.
Thank you.
One point that if I can back up a second, the entrances onto Victory with the amount of traffic and with parking, we would like to see some kind of no parking, like 2 car lengths, 1.5 car length on either side of the entrances to give more of a vision triangle, because with the amount of traffic there, and if you do have trucks parked there, you can't see until you're out into the lane. So if we can get some kind of no parking buffer step back, that would be very helpful. And I don't know, this probably wouldn't apply, but it should happen at Virginia on the south side as well, because there's just a vision triangle problem there with parking.
Great, thank you. Where were we on time? 16 and a half. Okay, great. We will now hear from the applicant. That was 16 and a half total minutes, if you want to use that. 16 and a half.
Madam Mayor, council members, my name is Alex Drexel. My address is 3034 South Sequoia, Salt Lake City, Utah. I have a couple of brief comments before we get into the details of the application. First, I want to thank Delaney, Tim and staff, the rest of the staff of the city of Boise for their hard work and quick responsiveness throughout this process and challenging us to bring the best project forward for a truly unique and special opportunity. Second, I want to briefly introduce the team behind the development. I'm the development director for Layton Construction. Layton has had a presence in Boise since the early 1990s, and our company just yesterday celebrated its 70th anniversary. We're working on behalf of Welltower Inc. to identify, deliver, and design what we call wellness housing across the greater Treasure Valley, along with our trusted consultants, Kimley Horn and DPZ. Welltower is a national leader in the health and wellness space, and a long-term holder in all their assets. Because of this, the concerns of the community are of great importance to us, as has been noted a few times. We had a series of 4 neighborhood meetings dating back to March of last year at nearby Hawthorne Elementary School and the gymnasium. At the request of the city, we extended the noticing radius up to 1,000 feet and notified nearly 1,200 residents each time. We worked with the community to listen and address many of their concerns and evolve the site plans together. We recognize the community concerns could become issues for our own residents and have worked hard to design a project that fulfills the city's plans for this property and elevates the quality of life for the entire community in the process. We appreciate the thoughtful feedback and look forward to growing together a common motto within our team is what is good for the community is good for Welltower and Layton. Thank you.
Evening, Mayor, members of the council, Deborah Nelson. My address is 601 West Bannock Street, here on behalf of the applicant team as well. We appreciate staff's work on this project and the commission's recommendation. We're in agreement with all of the conditions of approval from staff and the commission. I'm going to address the rezone and the subdivision and also the appeal in this time. As Delaney mentioned, it is an infill site on Victory near Vista, near the airport, adjacent to VRT route number 3, which runs up and down Vista, within a quarter mile of that bus stop there. And so the project has the opportunity to take advantage of transit going downtown to shopping areas and to the airport. Because it's infill, it's efficiently served by existing services as well. R3 zoning that we're requesting is consistent with the comprehensive plan designation of mixed use, which supports high density residential along corridors with access to transit. It is one of the allowed zones based on the mixed use designation, based on the city's matrix. It's consistent with the surrounding zoning as well. We've got R3 zoning to the northwest. R3 DA was just approved immediately to our west. And then the R1 C surrounds the east side of this, where the project has appropriately aligned single family residential and townhomes to transition from those uses. You can see that better here in the development plan. The entire layout has been carefully designed to take into account both feedback from the neighbors and the city staff, and to provide that housing and variety and compact walkable neighborhood that's called for in your comprehensive plan. And the uses have been arranged to transition the height and density away from those existing uses. Single family detached homes in a variety of 2, 3, and 4 bedroom styles that are shown in the blue shades are arranged on the eastern portion of the site. These are all adjacent to existing single family homes. The townhomes are shown in the purple shades. These provide further transition and include a variety of 2 and 3 bedroom styles. And then the apartments shown in pink include studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom units. They are centrally arranged along the western border adjacent to the planned multifamily Seasons on the Bench project. At the request of both staff and the neighbors, the site plan also includes 2,000 square feet of leasable ground floor commercial space and up to 6,000 square feet of additional non-residential flex space that we expect will include commercial uses, office, co-working space, a leasing office, and residential amenity space. The streets are laid out in a grid-like pattern with pedestrian-friendly streetscapes, including internal boulevards with island landscaping and bike lanes to provide a network of low-stress hiking and biking. It was important to the city that we connect to the existing stub roads to the east, which we have done. The streets are designed through our site to funnel traffic up and away from the existing neighborhood to our east. As Delaney described, the developer, ACHD, fire department, and planning staff have all worked to confirm that the widths and design of these streets are acceptable to both fire and ACHD. Now, the parking on site exceeds the city code standards. Delaney described the numbers if we didn't take advantage of any multifamily reductions. I think it's also appropriate to point out that the project is eligible for multifamily reductions. 862 spaces are required after applicable reductions are applied to the project for the podium parking and the 1-for-1 allowed for public street parking. Compared to those 862 spaces required, we provide 1093 on site, not using the public streets. So there's plenty of parking within the borders of the development, whether you count the public street parking or not. Vista Point amenities include the pavilion space, a dog park, playground, clubhouse, pool, terraced community garden, and multi-use pathways, plus, of course, the commercial and co-working space as amenities. The site includes 10 acres of open space, including 6 acres of publicly accessible green space. As Tim was noting at the outset, the development is really tailored towards providing public green space and designed around it. In the slide, you can also see that the apartments enjoy internal courtyards with private green space as well for those residents. The highlight of these public areas is the multi-use pathway along the New York Canal, continuing along to serve the project to the west, plus a new north-south pathway that runs along our western border to connect to Victory. In all, the site contains a total of 1.2 miles of off-street paths for pedestrians and bikers. I want to run through a few renderings so you can get a sense of what the development will live, how it will live, and what it may look like. This is a view of Central Street looking northeast from the New York Canal. This is a view of South Columbus Street, the entry looking southeast. This is South Annette Street looking south toward the clubhouse. And finally, this is South Annette Street looking east from the townhomes toward the single family homes. There's been a lot of work and productive discussions about transportation impacts and improvements for both this project and the adjacent Seasons on the Bench project next door, including a work session with City Council and ACHD on January 10th. A few transportation points I want to highlight. A traffic study was completed for this project and was approved by ACHD. The study included trips from Seasons on the Bench next door and Vista Apartments at Vista and Canal. The study found with the redesign of this development that at full build out in all of those projects, all roads will operate at acceptable levels of service except for a segment of Victory between the site and Canal Street, which was 19 vehicles over planning thresholds in the PM peak hour. Rather than asking the developer to widen Victory Road or planning to widen Victory Road themselves, ACHD instead required a new pedestrian hybrid beacon at Malad and Federal Way as alternative mitigation. The Vista Point developer is also required to install 3 raised crosswalks on Victory Road along the frontage, contribute $14,640 to a road trust deposit for future speed bumps along Columbus and Canal, restripe the left turn lane from Canal onto Vista to extend the storage capacity there, and install a multi-use pathway along the Victory Road frontage. ACHD has agreed to that multi-use pathway in lieu of the on-street bike lane and detached sidewalks. This was the design that was requested by council in prior hearings, and your planning staff has worked with ACHD to obtain their support for that. So now there will be on-street parking along Victory. ACHD also has a number of improvements planned in the area, including pedestrian improvements along Malad between Annette Street and Federal Way, which includes the railroad crossing. This design is already funded. It is in the 5-year work plan. It is funded for this year, 2023. Also in the 5-year work plan, the right-of-way is funded for 2024. As ACHD testified in the work session, they plan to construct the very following year in 2025. Their budget only shows 2 years of funding because that's the cycle where they budget. Additional improvements that are in the 5-year work plan include pedestrian improvements on Annette above Malad and pedestrian improvements on Victory, which will include the railroad crossing and filling sidewalk gaps. The Vista Neighborhood Association commented favorably on all of these improvements during the Seasons of the Bench project hearing. Along with the rezone and subdivision, before you tonight is the Neighborhood Association's appeal of the PUD objecting to the building height. Under city code, the city council must give due consideration to the commission's decision and may find error only based on the specified grounds in your code. The appeal filed by the Neighborhood Association did not identify any errors made by the commission in their approval of the PUD. And as described in our written submittals and in the project staff report responding to them, no error occurred. The decision complied with applicable laws and procedures. was not arbitrary and capricious and was supported by substantial evidence in the record. And though the appellant may disagree with the outcome, the P&Z did carefully consider the proposal based on the PUD standards. They issued a well-reasoned decision, and that included the height exception. With the PUD, the commission approved a height exception over the R3 zones 45 feet to accommodate buildings that are up to 68 feet. But of course, that's just with the appurtenances, the buildings themselves and the true impact of them. With the roof line is at 60 feet and the parapet is at 63.5 feet for the tallest interior portion of the multifamily building. The height exception is appropriate and necessary to accommodate the podium parking, to minimize surface parking. Also, it accommodates the ground floor commercial space that was requested by planning staff and neighbors, which, as Mr. Kangas noted, does have a taller ceiling at 16 feet versus 11 feet for residential. The proposed density here is approximately 20 units per acre, which is well within the levels allowed and encouraged with the mixed use future land use map designation near transit. The height allows that density to be vertically concentrated in the apartments, enabling a mix of housing types throughout the rest of the site and horizontal transition through single-family homes to the surrounding uses. Approximately 40% of that multifamily building that is centrally located is 5 stories. Approximately 35% is 4 stories, and the remaining approximately 25% is single story. This is less than the height that would be allowed in other zones deemed appropriate in the mixed use designation, such as the RO zone at 65 feet. The apartment building, as was discussed already, is significantly set back from the Sunrise Rim neighbors. The 4-story portion is 574 feet away. The 4-story portion is that distance, and the 5-story portion is 652 feet. The applicant also conducted a view study, which was part of the evidence presented to the commission in support of their decision. The Sunrise Rim neighbors are not only set back hundreds of feet, they are also 47 feet at the lowest point in elevation above the site and ranges up from there. Using a drone at a conservative 50-foot elevation, the applicant conducted this view study to demonstrate view impacts from 3 different points along Sunrise Rim. This is the view from point A. The apartments are shown in a massing form, a view that would be further softened by the planned surrounding lower profile buildings, significant green space and landscape improvements, and of course, the design and architecture of the buildings themselves. This is the view from point B. Here, especially along the south side, the green space and landscaping improvements along the canal will soften this appearance, as that is significant open space area. And here's the view from point C. In all of these perspectives, the impact in the foreground is minimal and the foothills views remain. All of this evidence was before the Planning and Zoning Commission, discussed at length in the hearings. Neighbors had the opportunity to present their evidence as well, which they did in testimony. And based on all of this evidence, after deliberation, the commission determined the proposed building height to be compatible and appropriate, and no error was made in that decision. With that, we ask for your support of the rezone, the subdivision, and to deny the PUD appeal. And we'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Questions?
Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
Deb, is impact to a view or a view shed an adverse impact to adjoining property?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Bajan, I think that this council appropriately does look at height and often do look at transition. The view per se isn't protected as a legal right, but it is appropriate to look at height when considering compatibility. And that's why this site is so carefully designed to provide the adjacent uses with that transition that's appropriate, with the lower single family homes transitioning to slightly taller townhomes, transitioning to the slightly taller apartments. And given the distance and given the facts that were presented about the minimal impacts to view, I think it's appropriate to find that there is no adverse impact based on all of those factors.
Thanks. I guess I'm just trying to figure out if I should be thinking about this in terms of adverse impact to nearby property, or if I should be thinking about it in terms of compatibility. Because we heard that, certain people feel that their property right will somehow be adversely impacted by a change in the view, which might be true, might not. But then we also heard that this is not compatible because the height is so different from what you'd see if you took, a 3-mile drive down this stretch. And so I'm actually just asking for help. Like, which bucket should I put the view issue in? Is it the adverse impact to property bucket, or is it the compatibility with surrounding uses bucket?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Bajent, I think it's appropriate to consider it in both. And I think they're trying to argue it in both. They're both PUD criteria. They're both considered, appropriately considered by the commission. And I think we've pointed to the evidence in the record that shows that it is both compatible and does not create an adverse impact.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor. Thank you. In our packet, we have a landscaping plan with an impressive number of trees, many of which are class 2 and class 3. The height of which should, at least the class 3s and some of the class 2s will be higher than this building. Is that right?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Clegg, I guess I don't
Not
know
right away.
how tall they grow.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But yes, they certainly will provide significant screening. It was discussed by the commission as they thought about what is going to be softening the view. Landscaping was certainly part of it.
And I asked that, I know many people on the rim today, overlooking some of our larger parks, legacy parks that have full-grown trees, typically see mostly tree cover. They don't see much else, frankly, of the park. And it looks to me like this landscaping plan will help. It won't fully achieve that, but it will achieve that to a great degree from what I'm seeing.
And Mayor, I purposely went last that time, so I waited my turn this time around. One of the requests from the neighborhood association, I think, was just right there at the end, was trying to make sure that there was clear sight lines, sight triangles, turning in off Victory Road. I didn't really notice it when I was looking through the packet. It was kind of hard to tell, but you had a visual earlier, and it looked like there were bulb outs, extensions of the sidewalk where the intersections are that kind of put pedestrians further out in the middle on just about every entrance going in off Victory, maybe? Yeah, it looks like there's bulb outs up there.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, we have no objection to whatever design is appropriate and approved by ACHD in the city for site distance there. This is the design that was presented and approved by both. If there is any concern with encroachment into a view triangle, we have no objection to pulling that back and pulling back the on-street parking around those access points.
Yeah, I'm sure ACHD has some preferences, like if those are the exact spots for those types of bulb outs that would push the vehicles a little bit further back. I'm not sure if they do or not, but I know that they've got requirements for the site triangle, and trying to make sure that we leave those open, I think, is really important, especially since you're doing all the work for those raised crosswalks, which I think are something that we want to see more and more often. I think will really make a big impact. That's all the questions I got.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and hear from the public now. I'm going to start with, as I mentioned, the folks that signed up on this piece of paper. We've got, Tammy Zokan. And then following Tammy, we'll have Alan Seeliff. You can come on up.
Hi. Tammy Zokin, 2016 West Sunrise Rem Road. The record of public comment, testimony, and Planning and Zoning Commission deliberations contains substantial evidence of the adverse impacts this project will have on present and future residents in the Central Bench planning area. With all due respect to staff, the commission, and this council, the law has been misapplied. These errors are detailed in my written comments. In summary, first, The commission applied the wrong criteria in approving and recommending approval. The commission recognized adverse impacts on traffic and property in the vicinity of the project, but said these adverse effects were not material. Material adverse effect is not the standard. The commission recognized the incompatibility of the project with the neighborhood, but said that compatibility could be traded off for a design they liked. Compatibility traded for design is not the standard. Second, substantial evidence in the record shows the required criteria have not been met. The project will have adverse impacts on and be incompatible with the established neighborhood character and livability of the Central Bench planning area, especially existing nearby neighborhoods. There's no evidence in the record that a 68-foot height exception, which is more than 50% taller than the 45 feet allowed by code, is compatible with the established neighborhood character. The project does not promote public health, safety, and general welfare of present and future residents. It does not offer or encourage affordable housing, affordable and fair housing, or stimulate or provide for economic opportunity except for the applicant. It is not compatible with and will unduly burden the existing road and pedestrian infrastructure. The existing condition of lack of safe pedestrian cyclist connectivity will be greatly worsened by the additional thousands of anticipated trips per day. And there's no evidence in the record that the city previously identified and implemented targeted improvements to sidewalks, bike lanes, and other infrastructure to accommodate additional density in the vicinity. This project will prejudice substantial rights by adversely affecting property values and enjoyment of properties in the vicinity. It's not about the right to a view shed. It's about the right to what someone has invested in property and its assessed value, which is based on the current views. Additionally, it's about enjoyment of properties in the vicinity. Those are things the Idaho Supreme Court has recognized as substantial interest that can be prejudiced by projects like this one, especially when not based on code and existing laws. Based on the evidence currently in the record, the approval of the project would violate current law, would violate substantial property interest, and would be arbitrary, capricious, and an abuse of discretion. Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy. Next up, Alan. And then we've got Linda Claiborne and Alice. I'm not sure if it's cats or coats. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. The difference between the two projects that are going on the Vista neighborhood down there is the seasons followed what they said we're going to do and went below the height level of the canal. And this project is not. And I want you to also think about not one unit is going to be below 100% AMI. So it's really important for me to speak on Valentine's Day about the city I love and the reckless height of 68 feet. This is the first project that the Vista Neighborhood Association has appealed, I believe. So it's very important to our neighborhood. We are known as the city of trees. The average height of the tree in the United States is 45 feet, which is currently the allowed height of buildings by code in Boise. If you allow 68 feet, you'll be setting precedents and ruin the Boise's established mature trees. We have had 4 neighborhood meetings with the Vista Point developer. They specifically stated that they would not build above the height of the canal in each of these meetings. They stated they wanted to be a good neighbor, and it was a concern to the neighborhood that it was a concern to the developer. They told the neighborhood that they designed their buildings to match the highest part of Sunrise Rim neighborhood with the highest buildings in their plan. And they would not block or go above the canal. Now, without any neighborhood meeting and feedback, they have worked with planning and zoning and want to go to 68 feet. The highest building I could find on the Boise bench is the Boise Depot. It is 77 feet. The city has protected rim view lots and has not allowed developers to reach these heights above these canals in our rims. As an example, across from the proposed project on West Sunrise Rim, the apartments below were not allowed to build above the height of the canal. In the Boise Depot area, the Anniversary Inn and other multi-story hotels and apartments below were not allowed to build higher than the crescent rim view lots above. The most current development, called the Verve on Protest Avenue, this city council protected the view, from the Mesa Vista area and went as far as requiring underground parking to remove a level of height. Made the developer install a green roof to minimize the glare and remove air conditioning units on the tops of the building to lower the noise. And that is only for 175 apartments. This is going to have 892 apartments. And the previously mentioned Verve apartment complex of 175 is going to have 8,960 square feet of retail space for their residents. Vista Points is only going to have 2,000 square feet, one house, not enough. We get to talk to our mayor at our meetings in the Vista Neighborhood Association and the police chief. And the old police chief stated that one of the problems in the big city is massing people in one area without these people having an identity to the area.
Time.
That causes more crime. Sorry, I have a lot more to say, but
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can submit that if you want so that it goes into the record. Well, okay, great. Thanks. Linda Claiborne. And then Alice. Great.
3 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, wait. talk
Welcome.
fast. Hi, my name is Linda Claiborne. I'm a Boise native. And my dad is Dick Claiborne. If you know him, he sat on the council for 16 years in Nampa. So my dad always said, if you're going to come to me with a complaint, you better come with a solution. So I have to second what Alan said, that we went to these meetings and we feel a little misrepresented, that they said they were going to work in unison with the community. They wanted to be positive. They wanted to be good neighbors. And now all of a sudden they're going 68 feet tall. We didn't even know anything about that. There's no need. You know, I think it was Mr. Halliburton, you talked about standing on code, which is 45 feet. And someone else mentioned, you know, that they're concerned about density. We have so many apartments that are, and housing dwellings that are going in on Victory alone, and a hotel that's going in across the street on the west side. I don't think, and down on Vista, I don't think density of housing. I know we need more housing in Boise. So I don't think density should be an issue. But the solution would be they could lower the ceiling from 16 feet to 12 feet in the commercial. They could lower the 11 feet to 10 feet and they'd still get their density by having another floor lower to have more apartments. Another solution is that they could be also asked to do underground parking, just like the other apartment places did that were over on Protest Hill. I also believe that our neighborhoods are old, they're quaint, and we have a big city, small town atmosphere, and I love it here. I was born here. Well, down on Victory and on Canal, where Mr. Kangas lives, those homes are old. The people have been there since they were built, and people walk in the streets. There are no sidewalks. It's an old country road, used to be out of city limits. That's when I bought this house. Sorry, I get so emotional. Anyway, the kids play in the streets. Now they're going to walk in the streets. People are going to be parked on the streets. College kids, teenagers, they're going to be zipping down those streets. They already zip down the streets. And there is a train that uses that railroad track every single day. And there are no crossings. Those kids are going to be blaring across there. There's going to be accidents. And it's only in the 5-year plan to work on the railroad. And the Malad and Federal Way, that's way down by Federal, that's way down by Fred Meyer's. That's not near where the apartments are going in. Vista is the problem. 2-lane road, already busy. Traffic impact is terrible. I really think they need to double the wide on Victory, double the road if they're going to do that, have underground parking, and lower the ceiling so they can have their density. But it's an eyesore to see a 68-foot building when we all paid for our properties. We paid premium prices to have this view. And when those trees get big, we're not even going to see the foothills that she's talking about. We're going to see their trees. And the noise, nobody talked about the noise or the New York Canal, the right of way, that's going to become the walking path. Everybody's going to want to walk up there, and they're going to want to, and it's illegal. And it's, so anyway, I just, please, I oppose it.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I've got a question.
Oh, will you stand for a question?
I stand for questions.
I might not be the right person to argue against walking along the canal because I'm all for it, but that's not my question. So one of the things is there's an allowed density that's in this particular area. And one of the things that the applicant said is that rather than putting 3-story homes along the streets on Victory, that would be a large massing and would potentially block some people's views, that instead they stepped it up to a higher building in the middle and stepped it down towards the end to make it an easier, a step
Transition.
down transition into the neighborhood. Thank you.
And that would be much more attractive. Don't you think? It's not just seeing this eyesore of a 68-foot building, but yes, you're right. to
Perfect.
see
So
it
that's
gradual.
maybe the answer to my question. So you're saying that you would prefer that they be 3-story buildings along the edge and that it
Yeah.
not step down than rather have the height up.
Yeah, just so it's not an eyesore and so that it fits in more with the neighborhood and this planning of Boise, but the code is 45 feet. There's no need to go higher than that.
Right. You answered my question.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you. And now Alice Coates.
Well, I guess I'm just going to reiterate what everybody's already said. What I'm concerned with is the height exception. There was a valid reason for the council and the city to put in the height restriction in the first place throughout residential areas. And it's, people need that. People need to be able to see the sky. They need to not be able to look at just buildings. We don't live downtown with high-rise apartments. And I think if you drive throughout Boise, you see lots of 2-story apartment buildings. You see some 3-story, they're not too bad. Frankly, the drawings that she showed us were appalling, in my opinion. So if you drive through Boise, you'll see 2- and 3-story apartment buildings, and that's fine. But to just give a height exemption with no really need for it, that's what I'm really upset about that.
Thank you. So now I'm just going to start with you, ma'am, and we're going to work our way left. I imagine that everybody that came up front is planning on testifying. Great.
Sure.
And then after you've testified, please be sure to write your name and address on the piece of paper.
Sure. I'm Ann Coates, and I also live at 1900 Sunrise Rim, and I would like to talk about the massing model that we saw. We saw a view study perspective with the massing model there. And I see that the designers stated that would not obscure the view corridors from the Sunrise Rim. And it seems to me that really would. We actually live there right now, and seeing that massing model just made me understand very clearly how the current view of the downtown area is going to be completely obscured. All of the lights, the Christmas tree that is at the Capitol building and all that stuff is going to be completely obscured. And I think that that's something that is definitely an adverse impact on the Sunrise Rim properties in terms of property values. Clearly, it's going to reduce the property values because of that loss of view. And it seems to me like it's a direct transfer of property value to the penthouse owners who are going to be in that apartment complex. So I don't see the benefit of taking that property value from the Sunrise Rim properties and giving it to this new developer. I think that's a definite adverse impact, and I would definitely oppose that. I also think that I actually am a designer myself, and I don't think that the idea of stepping a mass up mitigates the mass. I think that actually, contrarily, I think it actually makes that mass bigger in perspective. And if all of those buildings are the same height, I think that allows people to sort of build that into their consciousness. Whereas if you have this mountain massing up, I think that actually causes people to see that as a greater impact than it would if the buildings were all basically at the same height. Thank you.
Thanks. Sure.
Hi, I'm Emilia Harpst. I live at 3481 South Annette Avenue. It's right off of Victory Street. I grew up there in the Victory area, just, little kid riding my bike, playing around. And when I think about that field that, will soon no longer be there, it's kind of disheartening. Change always happens, and I know that it's going to happen, but just such a big step, just going straight from a field to 68 feet in the air, I feel like it'll really smother the houses that are already there, all the traffic that it's going to bring. I don't know. I'm against the height exception. I think that the standard 45 feet would be perfectly reasonable.
Thank you.
Hello, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Drew Becker. I live at 1107 South Lincoln. I'm a Boise State senior and a community organizer. I've spent a lot of time in the neighborhood. I have friends and I have family that live along Sunrise Rim and on Victory. And I agree with all of the testifiers who spoke before me. And so as not to speak platitudes, I'll take a little bit of a different angle. I urge you to oppose this venture in favor of more affordable and equitable housing. The number of homeless in Boise has doubled in the past 2.5 years. On the short drive that I took to arrive here, I saw a number of new apartments and condos being built. There's clearly no shortage of new apartments being built, but there is a shortage of affordable apartments being built. Provide affordable and rent-controlled housing. This lot can be utilized to house these people. Why are we not allowing that? They are your constituents, your community members, your neighbors, and like our friends. Each night when we go home and get into bed, there is somebody cold and hungry sleeping less than a mile away from us on the street. I want you to think about the hundreds of people who could benefit from affordable or public housing built on this land. And I want you to recognize the abject and depraved violence of poverty that doesn't have to be there. And I want you to recognize all of the opportunities that you have to minimize this violence. This land is incredible. It's near the amenities of downtown, near the airport, near a university, near elementary schools, near a middle school, near parks. And this land could be used to give some of our community members, our neighbors, our friends, more dignified and decent lives. There is a unilateral and decisive power that you guys have to allow for homes for these people to be built. Take that opportunity. Solidarity forever. And I stand open for questions if there are any.
Thank you. All right, come on up.
Madam Mayor and the members of the council, my name is Alton Dean. I live at 3481 South Annette Avenue with Emilio Harpst. I'm a Boise native, grew up, born and raised here, and I am opposed to the height exception and just a few other things about this proposal, mainly the height exception. As many other people have testified, there does not seem to be any reason that there needs to be an exception. And I have personally taken a few walks around the canal, as woes, probably to the woes of those who live on Sunrise Rim. But I've taken a look at the view. It's a beautiful view, even from down below. You can see the twinkling city lights from downtown, and a big 68 feet story building there would completely block that and be in kind of it would stand out completely in our kind of suburb areas. Another thing, problem that I think this hasn't been properly addressed is the amount of traffic that would increase with 900 more or almost 900 more units. Victory is a small two-way road. There's not a lot of parking on the sides. There's no sidewalks. And I don't see a very clear way that they're going to address it. I saw the walkways, which I do think it needs. It's kind of a dangerous road. People do speed on it. But the amount of traffic that's going to be there, there's going to be so many more cars. It's going to be difficult to turn. I live off Virginia, and Kurt kind of mentioned that people parking on the sideways, I'm not really able to see where I'm turning, which seems very dangerous, especially when there's going to be more cars there. So I would just ask you to reconsider the proposal and the height limit exception for the better of everyone in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Corey Bays. I live on 1614 West Victory Road, and everyone's kind of been talking about the view up on Sunrise Rim. And like what you said, I kind of want to like bring that into a different direction with what Mr. Badgett said, with like how it would affect the housing and like everything else besides the view. Having more height and would cause more density, which would make the traffic a lot worse. And there's already like decently bad traffic and people speed on the road, all of that. And that will just like make it a lot worse, having like around 850 more units. So what I think is just like kind of lower down the height, make it that 45-foot limit, because that'll get rid of around like, I'm guessing a floor, and that'll like lower the density a little bit and then have less traffic. Thank you.
Is anybody else here to testify? Oh, great. Hi. Sorry, I didn't see you behind. Okay.
Should
Go
I
ahead.
go ahead?
Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Julie Hovey. I live on Nespers Street in the V&A area. I'll try to get my thoughts going here together. Why should this proposed change bother Boise and the V&A residents? At least 3 outcomes other than the additional developer profit will come from these changes. First, as developers build large, dense projects with additional floors, that you allow for more population growth and population density, obviously increasing the stress of your society. Second, as population density increases, so does the traffic, with resultant increases in driving time on local streets and freeways. There is increased danger. Third, infrastructure will be significantly impacted by more people residing and commuting between the proposed development and the bench residential area. The traffic will be substantial, to say nothing of the social impact of the increased population density. The proposed changes to the height limitations opposed by the V&A, clearly, if the developers are to build large buildings, dense population centers will impact existing single-family neighborhoods. I believe what I heard, somebody asked Deborah why the height exception was lifted up to 68 feet. And I think her answer was the height exception went to 68 feet to give us a height exception to 68 feet. Didn't seem to have a very clear answer for that question. But these things, the population growth, the traffic, the excess density, are things that will happen. Those are facts that you can count on. It's not somebody's opinion or feeling. And that's a good enough reason to say no, because this is a residential neighborhood. The zoning code and your comprehensive plan are your laws. It's not the proposed map that everybody talks about. That's something that people maybe looked at and think we can get there, but you can't get there by taking advantage of one neighborhood over another. With regard to the Director Keene's comments about how the project got better when he worked with them, I believe it can be made better even yet by working with the neighborhood. This is the question of the abuse of discretion. I think that having the privilege of sitting down with a director, who obviously is employees and whatnot, are inclined to needing to follow his instruction, and not giving that privilege to the neighborhood is kind of slight abuse. The height exception from 45 to 68 feet, that's 23 feet, that's 50% height exception. That's quite a lot. Let's not do that to these neighborhoods.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. If you're going to testify, please come on up so you can jump right in.
Hello, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name is Tate Sawyer. I live at 3481 South Emmett Avenue with Alton and Emilio. So I am a Boise native. I've lived here my whole life. I grew up here. And I think having something this very tall mass that will be in this neighborhood will just kind of ruin the views for everyone. It'll create a lot of danger with the density that increase, the traffic, much like with the railroad crossing that needs to be dealt with very quickly, even if the apartments were going in place. I think the opportunities that land could have is just a large potential, like with the homeless population, such as Drew said, or something like a community garden to help with people who can't afford groceries every week. I just think there's so much better that could be done, and I don't see any reason that the height increase should be there for just belittling the other houses and ruining the views for people like my house or the Sunset View and pretty much everything like that.
Thanks.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, my name is Maxwell Knight. I was born in Boise. I have friends on that street, family on that street, people who I've been around most of my life. And I think there was mention of how it impacts property value, but there's a lot more to it than that as well. I think it's important not to dismiss the value of just the view itself. I like to go on walks, and sometimes walking down that road, I just enjoy being able to look at it and enjoy the view. It's really nice. I love going on walks all the time. And I think it's important to keep in mind the value of just going on a walk and enjoying things that are around you. And having just a giant building can be an eyesore, and it can really take away from the experience of just going outside and enjoying everything. And it's also really important to note the street access as well. There's that street, but it also, I think, will congest like the ends of the street that have busier streets with it. And like, I feel like they're already a little off on how it works, and I feel like it'll make those busier as well. So I think it's important to probably not do the height increase.
Thank you. Is there anybody online?
Madam Mayor, I have one person online. This is Bruce Mastorovich.
Great. Welcome.
Hi, yeah, my name is Bruce Mastorovich. I live at 450 West Grove Street. I think this is a good project. I think subsidizing housing isn't the only path to affordability. I think you talk about who can actually get the subsidies, and that's, you know, people that are making below a certain amount, but people that are making 110%, 120%, or 130% of median income are still not wealthy by any means. And the only way you get housing they can afford is just supply and demand. I think it's a good place for density. I think, as people have said, it's close to downtown, it's close to BSU, it's close to Micron. You could bike to any of those places. This is going in a vacant lot, so it's not displacing anyone. I think there's a lot to like about this. I thought the drawings they had looked really nice too. That's it.
Thanks. Is there another hand raised?
Madam Mayor, we also have Tanya Isupi.
Hey, Tanya.
Hi, my name is Tanya Usepi. I live at 2110 West Sunrise Rim. I do oppose the height and I did submit some written testimony, but I would like to comment on some of the previous discussions. One, none of the drone studies actually came straight out from the main views. They came from the corner edges, and then one was a little bit in the center, but not really in the center, to really demonstrate what those views are actually going to be like. So I have a hard time, thinking about how far away they might be from, whether it's from Sunrise Rim or from Victory. The buildings on the fifth, somebody said that the buildings on the fifth floor were to accommodate parking, but they didn't talk about whether or not they could have done underground parking. I know that there's been other subdivisions being built up where they've built underground, so I think that would be important. Next, there's been discussion about the views are not protected, but the views, and that the apartments on the fifth floor are going to get views, but they're not the ones paying property tax. Apartments aren't paying the property tax. Sure, they're paying for, to live in those areas, but we're paying property tax. So the adverse impact for, those on Sunrise Rim is the value of the property. We don't get take away part of the view, and then all the mechanics that are on top of the buildings. And then if you're down on Sunrise or on Victory or some of the side streets, and what are they going to be looking into? They're going to be looking into these giant buildings, and some of them, again, I just think that we shouldn't approve the variance, or rather the height exception to the 65 feet. I just don't think that's acceptable. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any questions for staff before we go to closing rebuttals?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I want to clarify something about the height. I think I saw a diagram early that the 58 feet will be the top of elevator shafts. And also wonder what, if anything, we've talked about on the roof finishes.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, that is correct. The maximum height of 68 feet includes the very highest point with any appurtenances on the roof. For the majority of the highest portion of the building, I believe it's 63.5 feet to the building and roof line. And I can pull up an elevation that's helpful to look at as well.
Okay, thank you. And then the other part of the question would be, I was trying to look on here for the diagram. What are the various ceiling heights within the stories? There we go, that one, yeah.
Yeah, so Madam Mayor, council members, as you can see, there would be a variation in some of the floor ceilings, mainly to accommodate a commercial space and flex ground space on the ground floor. As you move up, those are going to be the residential units that have the smaller floor plates.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, question for staff. So I know that we've got, I think that one of the reasons for allowing higher was this allowed us to get 25 units deed restricted to 100% area median income or below. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, that was offered up by the applicant, that if they were going to go to that extra height above the zone district, that they would offer those 25 units deed restricted.
And do we know how long that lasts, what the term is?
I don't have that offhand, but I'm sure the applicant can attest to that.
Great, I'll follow up with that. And then one more question. So we had some folks that came and testified today, and one of the things that they, I think, encouraged us to look at was rent control, which I don't believe the state law allows us to do rent control, but we do have some ways to incentivize affordable housing. But there was a conversation in Planning and Zoning Commission that I think said that this particular development doesn't qualify for our housing bonus ordinance. And why is that?
Madam Mayor, council members, the housing bonus ordinance is restricted to areas within a certain distance of either a regional activity center or community activity center. So I believe they're just outside of that radius. Additionally, you have to be in a specific zone district to qualify. So in this case, I don't think they met the criteria to qualify for the housing bonus ordinance. So we really didn't have a tool in place to request that.
And if they would have qualified for the housing bonus ordinance, that would have been something that they would have to have opted into. It wouldn't have been something that we would have been able to require them to do.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, that is correct. It is an incentive. So if they wanted to apply to the housing bonus ordinance, some of the incentives they would get would be height increase, no maximum density, but they would have to do specific deed restrictions based on the number of units.
And so last question here, sorry. So I guess what ended up happening then is that even though we didn't have they didn't call for a housing bonus ordinance, they still volunteered to do something similar in getting a little bit of extra height by getting 25 units at that 100% AMI workforce housing.
Madam Mayor, council members, that is correct.
Okay, thank you so much.
Madam Mayor. So at 43.5 acres, almost 44 acres, if they maximize the height across the development rather than doing a variety of heights, by my calculations, they could have over 1,800 units. Is that, that seems like a lot, but it looks like what the right calculation is.
Madam Mayor, council members, yes, at the current proposal, they're just over 20 units per acre. At the zone that they're requesting, it can go up to 43.5. Of course, they would have to meet all the criteria for road improvements and site improvements, but if it was designed with a lower height, they could have spread the density out. However, with this proposal, it concentrated that density to one location and gave us more variety in housing diversity as well as transition.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, we are going to go now to rebuttals. We'll start with the applicant, Deb Nelson, and then we'll finish with Dave Kangas, the appellant.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I want to ask you to focus on the rezone as a separate decision than the PUD, because I think there was some testimony, most of the testimony was about height, so I'll definitely respond to that. But there was some testimony just about lower the density overall and suggesting that you could accomplish that by reducing the height. And so I think it's appropriate to take these, they are separate applications, they've come up to you in separate ways. So on the rezone where we're asking for R3, that is appropriate for this site based on your comprehensive plan. And it is compatible based on the future land use map, the density that's expected here. It's because it's adjacent within 1/4 mile to a transit stop. It's an area that the comprehensive plan has called for placing density, and that's why R3 is an appropriate zone. We could have made the case for a more dense zone based on the same criteria, but instead we have selected the R3 zone for this site, and that's appropriate. And so within that zone, if you agree with that analysis that this is appropriate based on your comprehensive plan and those street and transit factors, then it comes to the question of design. And would you allow, and Councilmember Clegg, you are correct, it would be, over 1,900 units that would be allowed here based on that density. Then you get to design where you're looking at things like compatibility, adverse impacts. You're looking at traffic impacts. And that's why we did present a lot of evidence, and the commission considered a lot of evidence about transportation. And also looking at the design, and that transition is appropriate to look at adjoining neighborhoods. Ms. Zokin said trade-off for design is not the standard. Well, but actually it is. In your PUD criteria, you are asked to evaluate compliance with the comprehensive plan. Your comprehensive plan talks about things like transition, talks about providing a mix of housing. And in order to get that housing diversity here and to be compliant with the future land use map, and working with the design team, it made more sense to vertically concentrate that rather than having that flat across, which would have been appropriate within R3, but maybe not the best design and maybe not the best view from the streetscape. I find it interesting too that you've heard some commentary from the Sunrise Rim neighborhood that they're okay with that flat design if it's higher. The 3-story across the board is fine with them. Well, they're above it. So it doesn't impact them in the same way. They're not impacted on the streetscape, or like the residents to the east or across Victory are impacted by that. They benefit from that transition. What the Sunrise Rim neighborhood benefits from is that significant distance. And Councilmember Clegg, you asked about the height, and yes, it's 68 feet to the appurtenances. It's 63.5 feet to the parapet. It's 60 feet to the roof line. At 652 feet from the closest residence on Sunrise Rim, so a significant distance. The roof treatment isn't valuable to them at that distance and at that height because it's a comparable height to them and it's so far away, and so that roof treatment isn't needed. Also, there's comments about the viewpoint. That central viewpoint was the most impacted house because it was directly 90 degrees from the center of the highest building. And if you remember that highest point is also only 40%, we're talking a small footprint of this vertical integration. And even at that most impacted point that we measured from that viewpoint B, the foothills views are preserved. And it's minimally into the lower view. And why shouldn't we create views for new residents? So yes, there will be some new views that are created there for new Boise residents, for renters that will enjoy that as well, that'll also get to take advantage of that. That they will also benefit from having more supply of needed housing and in an area that's appropriate because it's well served, close to amenities, and everyone will get the same benefit of the public spaces. Whether you are a resident there or you are a neighbor, you will get to enjoy this community that's been designed. A final quick note in answer to your question about trees, according to our engineer, class 1 trees at full maturity are 25 to 30 feet, class 2, 30 to 40 feet or more, class 3, 70 feet or more. So you are correct. And with that, we'll stand for any questions.
Thanks. All right, we'll hear from the appellant. Thank you. Dave Kangas.
As far as the overall layout goes, I don't have the copies of the 3 different plans that we had when we went through the first 3 meetings, but the density varied from 800 to 850. They had 3 podiums, 2 podiums. So the point I'm trying to make there is they'd always they always had planned on a mixed use development, and they'd always planned on 45 feet. So that's kind of what we had based everything on. And at some point they decided to go with a different design. And I don't know how many units are on that 5th story, but to come back and say, well, we can just go flat all out and do 40 units across the whole thing, because then there would have really been, we'd be here for a couple of days probably. So it's really just been that height issue. And as far as the subdivision goes, you've heard a lot of testimony just on the impact of having that many people there. And that's just, for me, it's just really hard to imagine with over 3,000 new residents between the 2 developments and how that's going to impact not just living right there, but living in the area, shopping, doing everything around there. That's a big change. But again, the railroad crossings, we've got a lot of, that's a big issue because with that amount of traffic, we've already talked about, we covered well with the sidewalks and the traffic mitigation. So I really can't think of much more to add to it.
Thank you. All right. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing.
Madam Mayor, can I ask a question, I guess, of staff or legal? Are we doing this in 3 separate motions?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Halliburton, that would be preferable just to ensure that the record is clear.
Madam Mayor, I'll make the first motion to, I move that we deny the appeal for the rezone.
Second.
Madam Mayor, so I tried to ask a lot of questions tonight, and I really appreciate my fellow council members asking questions as well. A lot of the questions I think were asked also at the Planning and Zoning Commission, and trying to make sure that we are getting consistent and correct answers and trying to understand the reasoning behind it. And going through both the minutes, going through this questioning here, I don't see a mistake that they made by law, by being arbitrary or capricious. And so I just don't see any grounds that we would have to overturn that decision. So that's why I made the motion.
Two points of clarification. You meant to say the appeal of the CUP, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And then to return with findings that substantiate or back up the motion that you've just made.
Yep, that's correct.
Madam Mayor, I seconded, but I was wanted to clarify that as well. Typically, we either approve or don't approve the rezone first because it becomes the basis for whether or not the PUD or the subdivision is allowed. And so the rezone was not appealed. It was a recommendation to us.
Madam Mayor, I'm happy to move to approve for the rezone first, if that would be better.
I would second that.
All right, Madam Mayor, I approve the rezone, CAR 2210, 2017 West Victory Road, rezone of approximately 43.93 acres from 1A to R3D with a DA.
Second.
Discussion on this one?
Madam Mayor, I'll be supporting the motion mostly because the comprehensive plan calls out exactly this type of proposed use for the zone in exactly this area. And that's really the heart of the issue. This zone does comply with what the comprehensive plan is asking for right here. So it's supported, and the recommendation seems correct.
Madam Mayor, I would just second that, those comments. Those were the comments I was going to make.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I would add, just looking at this as a rezone, it's consistent with what's around it. It's consistent with what we have approved before. If you were looking this straight up as a rezone, then this would be something that we know that we want to see in this area.
All right, clerk, will you call the roll for the motion to approve the rezone?
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And now we'll pick up the other motion already made for the PUD and the appeal. I think you already discussed it. Do you have more to add? Nope. Anything?
Madam Mayor, just briefly on the height issue, and the word that gets used is views. There's some sort of nebulous concept there, and it's not like a property right, but there's something like important about being able to walk down a street and have something to look at that's appealing. And I get it. And I really am struggling with what I called what bucket to put this in, especially under the conditional use standard. None of it seems to fit very well, but it's an important issue, and it is kind of nebulous. Here, we have a record from the Planning and Zoning Commission where they talked about this exact thing, and they deliberated about it, and they had people, engineers measuring distances. They had the massing models. They talked about all of the same things. And so they saw substantial evidence either way for both arguments. So that the decision wasn't made without substantial evidence. It's not arbitrary or capricious or made on a whim because they talked about it for so long. And it doesn't seem to conflict with any law. It's not illegal. And so I think our job on that issue, even though it's challenging and can be seen in different ways, is to affirm the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Madam Mayor, I actually did have a few more comments on the PUD. I appreciate Councilmember Bajent's description of what our job is here. And I think, PUDs are a bit nebulous on purpose, because the purpose of a PUD is to take what otherwise could be a pretty vanilla cookie cutter blend something and make it something different. In this case, it does quite a bit different, including height in the middle and a lot of variety around the edges. Again, our job is to understand, did the Planning and Zoning Commission fully explore that? Did they fully dig into whether or not those changes from flat plain vanilla to this something different fit inside the code? And after long deliberation, they agreed that it did. And I also can't find any error in the way that they approached that.
All right, looks like there's no further discussion on the appeal, so I'll take a vote on that. Clerk?
Bajent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
And Madam Mayor, on the third one, I move that we approve subdivision 22-27 Vision Point subdivision on 2017 West Victory Road.
Second.
We have a motion, and a second discussion.
Madam Mayor, I know that we've discussed all these things, quite a bit already. We've covered a lot of ground. I wanted to make sure that I brought up this point. If I was looking over a big field and I could decide that I would be able to look over this field forever and not see anything, I would say that would be a pretty great view. And this would be a really nice field to look at. But one of the things that we know that's going to happen is that this area is going to be developed and we get to decide what it's going to look like underneath. And if I'm in that same spot and I get to decide, do I want to see a handful of single family housing that's going to be more expensive than what people would be able to afford than this many units? If I'm looking down at just a handful of housing that's taking up the majority of the land without any access to public space whatsoever, or a subdivision that has almost 10 acres of public space built into it, if I'm looking down and I see a canal access road that may or may not ever be turned into a pathway up top, but I've got a subdivision below that's got a protected easement that has the ability to extend a really long walking path for a really large distance, then I do see a lot of wins here. It doesn't surprise me that people have a hard time, with this amount of change going from a bare piece of land, like one of you brought up, to something this radically different. But if we were to look and say, should we try to get as many people on this piece of land as we can in a way that accommodates all the things that are in city code and creates open space and walking paths and has some aspect of affordability that we actually can't require, then I think that this is a really, really good subdivision. The last thing I want to say is I really do appreciate everybody who testified tonight, folks who lived in the neighborhood, folks who are getting involved. I really appreciate the younger folks coming down. Don't be offended by younger folks. I mean, anybody 39 years old or younger, as younger folks isn't very common for us to have coming in here, and it makes a big difference. And we appreciate you all coming in. And it is nice to know what you think and what you want to see in your neighborhoods, and it does guide decisions going forward. So I appreciate you all coming down.
Madam Mayor, the only thing I'd like to add to that is that along with this subdivision, when we considered the one adjacent to the west, we did work hard with HHD to determine what improvements could be made to the transportation system, because clearly this is a neighborhood that hasn't had any improvements for a very long time. And when things of this magnitude get built, you deserve to have some improvements made so that the neighborhood doesn't have to suffer negative consequences. More traffic is going to be there, but in the face of that traffic, there's going to be some significant improvements on Victory with a 10-foot multi-use path with a tree lawn that will protect that multi-use path, while the railroad crossing on Victory isn't fully funded yet. The railroad crossing on Malad is. It is going to get built in 2024. And you can rest assured that this council will continue to work with HHD to ensure that the railroad crossing on Victory also gets built in a timely manner, because it's necessary with this kind of development to have those kinds of improvements. So I'm confident that the site will be able to handle the additional people that will be coming here because of those improvements.
All right, well, I don't vote on these topics. I'm here to convene the meeting. I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight, for the neighborhood, for the work that you've done on this, the other one, and also with us to address some of the transportation needs that we're trying to address with ACHD. And while it's in a 5-year work plan, it is happening before 5 years. It's in that 5-year work plan, but because the neighborhood has brought up some of the issues, we had that discussion with ACHD after the neighboring application. And I want to welcome everybody that's come down here for the first time. I was just going to say that Jimmy says everybody under 39. I'd say everybody under, I don't know, like mid late 40s is young at this point. There were many years when I would be down here testifying or serving on committees in my 20s. And it was rare that there were, I would say, the next generation of adults in our community that were participating. So I really appreciate that you all came down and that you care enough about the community that is your home now, regardless of whether you were born here like our kids were or chose this place for school or any other time. You're always welcome. And so I want to thank you for being here. And with that, we're going to have the clerk call the roll and then we'll adjourn.
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Madam Mayor, move we adjourn. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.